At my 70th birthday party, my son-in-law Braden took the microphone and tapped it until the feedback screeched through the ballroom, silencing 100 guests. He put on his best salesman smile, the one he uses when he is trying to close a deal on a condo that has black mold painted over. "We have a special surprise for Thaddeus today," Braden announced, his voice booming off the crystal chandeliers. "We have decided that it is time for him to live with the dignity he deserves. We are moving him to Golden Meadows Senior Living. That old trailer he lives in is not safe, and honestly, it is an eyesore. It is not even a real home." The crowd clapped politely, but I saw the confusion in their eyes. Then a waiter walking by with a tray of champagne stopped. He was an old friend of mine from the days when I laid bricks for this very building. He leaned toward a guest and whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. "That young fool does not know who he is talking to. Thaddeus does not just own that trailer, he owns this entire hotel." Braden went white as a sheet, but I just raised a finger to my lips. The game was just beginning. I am Thaddeus King. I am 70 years old, and most people look at me and see a man who lost at the game of life. I wear flannel shirts because they are warm. I drive a 1990 Ford pickup because the engine block is cast iron and it never quits. I live in a 30-foot Airstream trailer on 5 acres of land by the lake because that is where my late wife Lucille and I were happiest. People see the rust on the truck and the dirt on my boots and they assume I am poor. They assume I am simple. They do not know that 50 years ago I started a construction company with a shovel and a bad back and built it into King Holdings, a real estate empire that owns half the skyline of Chicago. I stepped down 10 years ago, burying my name under layers of LLCs and shell companies because I wanted peace. I wanted to grieve my wife without board meetings. But peace is a luxury my son-in-law Braden decided I could no longer afford. The invitation to my birthday party said formal attire. I wore my best Sunday suit, the one I bought 10 years ago for Lucille's funeral. It was a little tight in the shoulders, but the fabric was good wool. When I arrived at the Grand Millennium Hotel, I handed my keys to the valet. The boy looked at my rusted truck, then at the line of Mercedes and BMWs and sneered. I tipped him a $100 bill. The sneer vanished. That is the thing about money. It changes how people see you, but it does not change who they are. I walked into the ballroom. It was gold and cream dripping with excess. I knew the layout of this room perfectly because I had fired the original architect for trying to cut corners on the support beams in 1995. Braden saw me coming. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him too perfectly, like he was a mannequin brought to life. He rushed over not to hug me, but to intercept me. "Thad, you made it?" Braden said, his eyes scanning the room to see if anyone important was watching. "Listen, the seating chart got a little messed up. We had to move you." He guided me away from the head table where my daughter Zoe was sitting. He walked me past the center tables where his colleagues were laughing and drinking expensive scotch. He walked me all the way to the back corner of the room, right next to the swinging double doors of the kitchen and the service entrance to the restrooms. There was one chair at a small round table. It was the kind of table they use for overflow guests or children. "It is quieter back here," Braden said, patting my shoulder with a hand that felt cold and moist. "You know how you get overwhelmed by noise? We did this for you." I looked at the table. I looked at the bathroom door swinging open, releasing the smell of industrial air freshener. "This is fine, Braden," I said. My voice was gravel low and steady. "I always liked watching the kitchen staff work. They are the only honest people in the building." Braden laughed, a nervous tittering sound. "You are such a character, Thad. Just stay here. Try the shrimp. And please do not wander around bothering the investors. I have some very important people here tonight." I sat down. From my vantage point, I could see the whole room. I saw my daughter Zoe at the head table. She looked beautiful in a red dress, but she looked tired. She was drinking wine too fast. She saw me sitting by the bathroom, and for a second her face crumbled with shame. But then Braden sat next to her and whispered something, and she looked away. She chose her comfort over her father. That hurt more than the bad seat. A waiter came by and dropped a plate of rubbery chicken in front of me. I recognized him. It was Old Man Jenkins. We used to drink coffee together at the construction site 40 years ago. "Happy birthday," Mr. King Jenkins whispered, placing a napkin on my lap. "They put you in the cheap seats, huh? It gives me a better view of the rats." "Jenkins," I said, winking. "Keep the coffee coming. It is going to be a long night." Halfway through dinner, Braden stood up. He tapped his glass. The room went silent. He adjusted his cufflinks and smiled that shark smile. "I want to introduce you all to a special man," Braden said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "My father-in-law, Thad." He waved me over. I stood up and walked toward the center of the room. I felt the eyes of 100 strangers on me. I saw them judging my old suit, my calloused hands, my slow walk. As I reached the main table, a man stood up to shake Braden's hand. I recognized him immediately. It was Sterling, the CEO of the real estate firm where Braden worked. Sterling was a pompous man who I had refused to do business with in the 80s because he cheated his subcontractors. Braden, Sterling said, looking at me. "Is this the father-in-law you told me about? The one with the property issues?" Braden stiffened. He stepped between me and Sterling, blocking me from view. "Yes, sir," Braden said quickly. "This is Thad. He used to be, well, he was the family gardener for years. Hard worker. Very simple man. We take care of him now." Gardener. The word hung in the air. I looked at Braden's back. He was ashamed of me. He could not admit that his wife came from a man who built things with his hands, so he demoted me to the help. I stepped around Braden. I looked Sterling in the eye. "I grew a lot of things in my time," I said. "Weeds are the hardest to kill, though. They thrive in dirt." Sterling laughed, not understanding the insult. "Charming. Well, happy birthday, old-timer." Braden grabbed my arm, his grip painful. "Okay, time for the gifts," he announced loudly, pulling me toward the stage. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit us. Braden pulled a large envelope out of his jacket pocket. It was wrapped in a red ribbon. Thad, Braden said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "We know life has been hard for you since Lucille passed. We know you struggle out there in that old trailer with the drafts and the leaks. We worry about you every night." He handed me the envelope. "We wanted to give you the gift of security," Braden said. "Open it." I opened the envelope. Inside was a glossy brochure. On the cover was a picture of 2 old people sitting in wheelchairs staring blankly at a television. The title read, "Golden Meadows Senior Living, Budget Care for the Indigent." I knew this place. It was a warehouse for the dying. It was a state-subsidized facility on the south side, known for bed sores and neglect. I looked at the brochure, then I looked at Braden. "You are putting me in a home?" I asked. "It is a community," Thad, Braden corrected, speaking into the microphone so everyone could hear his generosity. "We have paid the deposit. You will have a shared room, 3 meals a day, and staff to watch you. You won't have to worry about that trailer anymore." The crowd applauded. They thought he was a saint saving a poor old man from squalor. Zoe was clapping too, but she was looking at the tablecloth, tears streaming down her face. I closed the brochure. "I do not want this," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the silence between claps it carried. Braden's smile faltered. "What?" I said, "I do not want this," I repeated. "I like my trailer. It is warm. It has memories. It is my home." Braden laughed, trying to salvage the moment. "Oh, Thad, you are just overwhelmed. You do not know what is best for you. That trailer is falling apart. It is not dignified. It is paid for," I said, "which is more than I can say for your house, Braden." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. Braden's face turned a dark shade of red. He stepped close to me, wrapping his arm around my shoulder in a hug that was actually a headlock. He leaned his mouth to my ear so only I could hear. "Listen to me, you ungrateful old fossil," he hissed. "This isn't a suggestion. It is an eviction. I have already filed the paperwork with the city declaring your trailer a health hazard." I stiffened. "You did what?" "You have 1 week," Braden whispered, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and rot. "Next Monday the bulldozers are coming. We are clearing that land. I have investors lined up to build condos on that lakefront. You are going to Golden Meadows, or you are going to the street. Do not make a scene. Smile and thank me." He pulled back, beaming at the crowd. "He is just speechless," Braden announced. "He is so happy he can't talk. Let's hear it for Thad." The crowd cheered. The music started playing. Braden pushed me toward the stairs. I walked back to my table by the bathroom. I sat down. I looked at the brochure. Golden Meadows. He wasn't just sending me away. He was stealing the land. He was going to bulldoze the rose garden Lucille had planted. He was going to crush the only place on earth where I could still feel her presence. I looked across the room. Braden was laughing, clinking glasses with Sterling. He looked like a king holding court. He thought I was a gardener. He thought I was a helpless old man who could be discarded like a bag of grass clippings. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old flip phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 10 years. "Hello?" A voice answered. Sharp. Alert. "Marcus," I said. "Thad," the voice said. "It has been a long time. Is everything okay?" "No, Marcus," I said, watching Braden laugh. "I need you to dust off the corporate seal. I need to buy a nursing home." "And Marcus." "Yes, Thad. Find out who holds the mortgage on my son-in-law's house. I want to buy that too." I hung up. I picked up the rubbery chicken and took a bite. It tasted like cardboard, but I chewed it slowly. I needed my strength. The gardener was about to do some weeding. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had someone mistake your kindness for weakness. The coffee in my mug was black and strong, just the way Lucille used to make it. I sat on the fold-out aluminum step of my 1978 Airstream Sovereign, watching the sunrise paint the surface of Lake Michigan in shades of purple and gold. To the untrained eye, my home looked like a relic. It was a silver bullet-shaped camper parked on a patch of grass with tires that had not touched asphalt in a decade. People drove by on the highway up the hill and looked down with pity. They saw a crazy old black man living in a tin can. They saw poverty. They did not see the 5 acres of prime lakefront deeded land that sat underneath my boots. They did not know that I had turned down offers of $10 million for this soil because you cannot put a price tag on the place where you fell in love. This was not a campsite. It was a shrine. And I was its guardian. But guardians have enemies. The silence of the morning was shattered by the roar of an engine. Not my old Ford truck, but the high-pitched whine of a German sports car. I did not have to look up to know who it was. My son-in-law Braden drove like he owned the road, just like he acted like he owned my daughter. I took a slow sip of coffee and stayed seated. I was not going to give him the satisfaction of standing up. A sleek black Audi SUV crunched over the gravel driveway, kicking up dust onto my freshly washed truck. Braden stepped out. He was wearing a beige suit that cost more than my first house. He was not alone. A man I did not recognize climbed out of the passenger side. He was older, heavy-set, wearing a hard hat and carrying a set of blueprints. I watched them over the rim of my mug. Braden did not wave. He did not say hello. He did not even look at me. He walked right past the Airstream, leading the stranger toward the water's edge, as if I were nothing more than a lawn ornament. "Check out the sight lines," Braden said, sweeping his arm across the horizon. "You have 200 feet of private beach, unobstructed views of the skyline to the north. Once we clear the vegetation and level the grade, you can fit a 12-unit luxury condo complex right here." The stranger nodded, tapping a pen against his chin. "It is a gold mine, Braden. But what about the structures?" He pointed at my home. "My Airstream, my sanctuary." Braden laughed. It was a dismissive, cruel sound. "Don't worry about the scrap metal. That is just temporary storage. It will be gone by the time we break ground. The previous owner left a lot of junk behind, but I have a crew coming to haul it to the dump next week." The previous owner. My blood ran cold. He was talking about me in the past tense while I was sitting 20 feet away. He was erasing me. I set my mug down on the grass. I stood up. My knees popped, but I straightened my back. I walked over to them. I moved quietly. Years of walking on construction beams had taught me how to move without making a sound. "Good morning, Braden," I said, my voice deep and rumbling like a distant thunderstorm. Braden jumped. He spun around, clutching his chest. The stranger looked surprised. "Oh," Braden said, recovering quickly. "Thad, I didn't see you there. You blend in with the scenery." He turned to the stranger. "Mr. Sterling, this is Thad. He is the squatter. I mean the caretaker I told you about. He watches the property for us." The stranger. Mr. Sterling looked me up and down. He saw my flannel shirt, my worn jeans, my work boots. He curled his lip. "You let him live here?" Sterling asked Braden, ignoring me completely. "It brings down the property value just having that thing parked there." "It is a temporary arrangement," Braden assured him. "He is moving out immediately." "Right, Thad." I looked at Braden. I looked at the blueprints in the stranger's hands. I saw the lines drawn right through Lucille's rose garden. I saw the concrete foundation planned right where we had buried our dog Buster. "I am not moving anywhere," I said calmly. "And this is private property. Unless you have a warrant or an invitation, you are trespassing." Braden's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. He smelled of cologne and desperation. "Don't embarrass me, Thad," he hissed through his teeth. "Mr. Sterling is a major investor. Go back to your tin can and let the men talk business." I did not move. "This is my land, Braden," I said loud enough for Sterling to hear. "And it is not for sale." Braden let out a short, sharp laugh. He turned to Sterling. "Give us a moment, would you, sir? The help is being difficult." Sterling rolled his eyes and walked toward the beach, talking on his cell phone. As soon as he was out of earshot, Braden's mask fell. His face twisted into a sneer. "Listen to me, old man," he spat. "You are ruining everything. I have leveraged everything on this deal. This development is going to put me on the map. I promise Sterling this land is clean. Do not make me a liar." "You are a liar, Braden," I said. "You are selling something you do not own. That is fraud." Braden poked a finger into my chest. It felt like a knife. "It is not fraud. If I have power of attorney," he said. "Zoe is worried about you. She says you are losing your mind out here, living like a hermit, talking to a dead woman. We are going to have you declared incompetent, Thad. And once we do, I become the trustee. And the first thing I am going to do is bulldoze that piece of junk you call a home and pave over this entire pathetic life you built." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You are a stain on this family. I am doing Zoe a favor by scrubbing you out." He turned on his heel and walked away to join Sterling. I stood there for a moment watching them. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it almost blinded me. He wanted to declare me incompetent. He wanted to use my grief for Lucille as a weapon to steal her legacy. I turned and walked back to the Airstream. I climbed the steps and closed the door. The interior was cool and smelled of cedar and old paper. I sat down at the small dinette table. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were shaking. I took a deep breath, in and out, just like I used to do before walking onto a high beam. I dialed Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "Thad, is everything all right? You sound tightly wound." "I am fine, Marcus," I said, "but I have a job for you. Name it." I looked out the window. I could see Braden pointing at my rose garden, making a chopping motion with his hand. "Braden Reynolds," I said, "my son-in-law. I want to know who he works for. Not just the company name. I want to know the parent company. I want to know the holding group. I want to know who signs the checks at the very top of the food chain." "Give me 2 minutes," Marcus said. I could hear the clicking of a keyboard on the other end. I waited. I watched Braden laughing with Sterling. He looked so confident. He thought he was the shark in the tank. He did not know he was swimming with a leviathan. "Okay," Marcus said. "He works for Apex Realty Group, mid-sized firm, specializes in luxury condos, but Apex is a subsidiary. They were bought out last year by a conglomerate called the Vanguard Trust." "Vanguard Trust," I repeated. "Is it publicly traded?" "No," Marcus said. "Private equity. The majority shareholder is looking to liquidate. They are overextended in the Asian markets. They are desperate for cash." "Perfect," I said. "What are you thinking, Thad?" "I want to buy it," I said. "Buy what, Apex?" "No," I said. "Buy Vanguard. Buy the whole damn thing." There was silence on the line. "Thad," Marcus whispered, "that is a 9-figure acquisition. That is half your liquid assets. You have been retired for 10 years. Why do you want to get back into the game now?" "Because I said watching Braden kick a pile of dirt onto my clean truck. Someone needs to teach my son-in-law a lesson about property rights, and the only language he speaks is ownership." "I can have the paperwork drawn up by noon," Marcus said. His voice shifted. He sounded excited. The old warhorse was smelling gun smoke. "Do it," I said. "And Marcus, keep my name off it. Use the Shadow Corp LLC. I want to walk into that office as the owner and watch his face when he realizes he works for the gardener. Consider it done." I hung up. I felt a grim smile spread across my face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who just locked the gate and threw away the key. I opened the door and stepped back out into the sunlight. Braden and Sterling were walking back toward the cars. Braden saw me and veered off the path, marching straight toward me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slapped it against my chest. "What is this?" I asked. "Read it," Braden said, smirking. I unfolded the paper. It was a legal document. An official notice from the county health department. Notice of eviction. Unsanitary conditions. Failure to maintain structure. I looked up at him. "You reported me," I asked. I did my civic duty, Braden said, adjusting his tie. I told them there is an old man living in squalor with no running water and a sewage leak. They expedited the order. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises, Thad. If you are not gone by Friday, the sheriff will remove you and the county will condemn the structure. He leaned in close one last time. It is over, old man. Golden Meadows is waiting. Pack your bags, or don't. It is all going to the dump anyway. He laughed and walked away. He got into his Audi and drove off, leaving me standing in the dust. I looked at the eviction notice, unsanitary, squalor. I looked at my Airstream gleaming in the sun. It was spotless. I scrubbed the floors on my hands and knees every week. He had lied. He had bribed someone at the county. He had played dirty. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket next to my phone. 48 hours. He thought that was my deadline. He was wrong. It was his. I drove my old Ford pickup truck to the subdivision where my daughter lived. It was a gated community with perfectly manicured lawns and houses that looked like wedding cakes made of stucco and stone. The security guard at the gate hesitated before letting me in. He looked at the rust on my fender and the tools in my truck bed with suspicion. I wanted to tell him that I poured the concrete for this gatehouse 20 years ago. I wanted to tell him that I owned the bank that held the mortgage on half the homes in this neighborhood. But I said nothing. I just tipped my hat and drove through. I pulled into the driveway of the house Braden and Zoe lived in. It was a sprawling mansion with columns in the front that tried too hard to look important. There was a lease on the Mercedes in the driveway. There was a second mortgage on the house itself. I knew this because Marcus had pulled their credit report that morning. They were living the American dream on a line of credit that was about to snap. I walked up to the front door. I did not ring the bell. I used the key Zoe had given me 5 years ago, the day they moved in. Back then she had hugged me and said, "Daddy, this is your house too." Back then I still believed her. The house smelled of lavender and expensive cleaning products. It was quiet. Too quiet. "Zoe," I called out. I found her in the kitchen. She was sitting at the massive marble island, staring into a glass of white wine. It was 10 in the morning. She jumped when she saw me. She was wearing a silk robe and her eyes were puffy. She had been crying. For a second, I felt a tug in my chest. That was my little girl. That was the child I had carried on my shoulders. That was the woman whose hand I had held at her mother's funeral. "Dad," she whispered, "you should have called. Braden said you might come over." I took off my hat and placed it on the counter. I stood there in my flannel shirt and work boots, looking like a stain on her pristine white kitchen. "I did not come to see Braden," I said. "I came to see you." Zoe looked away. She took a quick sip of wine. Her hand was shaking. "I need to know something, Zoe." I said, my voice soft but heavy. "I need to hear it from you. Not from your husband, not from a lawyer, from you." She stared at the glass. "Do you agree with him?" I asked. "Do you agree that I should be evicted from the land your mother and I bought together? Do you agree that my home is just a pile of junk that needs to be bulldozed?" Zoe closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. I waited for her to say no. I waited for her to say that Braden was being unreasonable, that she would stand up for me, that she would never let anyone destroy her mother's rose garden. Instead, she took a deep breath and opened her eyes. When she looked at me, the sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that looked terrifyingly like her husband. "Braden is right, Dad," she said. The words hit me harder than any physical blow. I felt my knees lock. I gripped the edge of the counter to keep from swaying. "He is right," she repeated, her voice gaining strength. "Look at you, Dad. Look at how you live." "It is embarrassing." "Embarrassing," I whispered. "Yes," she cried, standing up. "You live in a tin can in the middle of a field. You drive a truck that sounds like a lawnmower. You dress like a homeless person. Do you know what people say? Do you know what Braden's colleagues say? They ask why the CEO's father-in-law looks like he digs through dumpsters for a living. I built this city, Zoe," I said. "My hands are dirty because I built the foundation you are standing on. That does not matter anymore," she shouted. "Perception matters, Dad. Image matters. You are hurting Braden's career. He is trying to close big deals. He is trying to elevate us. And every time you show up in that flannel shirt talking about the good old days, you drag us back down." She walked around the island waving her hands frantically. "And the land, Dad. My God, the land. It is 5 acres of prime lakefront property, and you are using it to park a trailer. It is selfish. It is incredibly selfish. Do you know how much that land is worth? I know exactly what it is worth, I said. It is worth 40 years of memories. It is worth the summer you learned to swim. It is worth the place your mother took her last breath. It is worth $5 million, Dad, she screamed. $5 million. Do you know what we could do with that money? Braden has a plan. He wants to invest it. He wants to secure our future. Your future, I asked. Or his debts. Zoe froze. She looked at me with suspicion. What debts, she asked quickly. Too quickly. I looked at her. She knew. Deep down, she knew they were drowning. She knew the cars were leased. She knew the credit cards were maxed out. But she was choosing to ignore it because the lie was prettier than the truth. Dad, please, she said, her voice softening, switching tactics. She walked over and put a hand on my arm. Golden Meadows is a nice place. They have activities. You will have a warm bed. You won't have to worry about the winter drafts. We are doing this because we love you. We want you to be safe. I looked down at her hand. It was manicured. A diamond ring the size of a grape sat on her finger. A ring paid for with money Braden had skimmed from his company accounts. I looked past her shoulder to the kitchen counter. There was a magazine lying there open. It was a glossy brochure for a Porsche dealership. A bright red SUV was circled in black marker. Next to it, in Zoe's handwriting, were the words, "My reward." I felt a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. I walked over to the magazine. Zoe gasped and tried to grab it, but I was faster. Is this the future? I asked, holding up the picture of the car. Zoe turned red. She snatched the magazine from my hand. I need a new car, she said defensively. My Rover is 3 years old, Braden said. Braden said if the land deal goes through, if we can develop the condos, he would get me the Cayenne. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I searched for the little girl who used to cry when a bird died. I searched for the young woman who wanted to be a teacher before Braden convinced her that status was more important than service. She was gone. My daughter had been replaced by this stranger, this woman who was willing to evict her 70-year-old father, destroy her mother's garden, and erase her family history for a red SUV. She wasn't worried about my health. She wasn't worried about the drafts in my trailer. She was worried about her reward. She was trading me for a Porsche. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't my heart. My heart was too old and scarred to break anymore. It was the tether, the invisible cord that binds a parent to a child no matter what they do. It snapped. I realized then that I could not save her from herself. I could not love her enough to fix what was broken in her soul. She had made her choice. She had chosen the gold paint over the solid wood. I put the magazine down. I smoothed the page with my hand. I see, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Dad, listen. Zoe began, tears welling up in her eyes again. Those fake, weaponized tears. It is not about the car. It is about us. It is about family. Yes, I said. It is about family. I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the high ceilings, the granite countertops, the stainless steel appliances. It was a beautiful cage. Braden is right, I lied. Zoe blinked. What? He is right, I said, letting my shoulders slump. I am old. The trailer is cold. Maybe it is time to let go. Zoe let out a breath she had been holding. She smiled. It was a smile of relief, but also of greed. Really, Dad? You mean it, I mean it, I said. I cannot fight you both. I am tired, Zoe. Oh, Daddy, she cried, throwing her arms around me. You are making the right decision. You will see. Golden Meadows is wonderful, and the land will provide for all of us. Yes, I said, patting her back awkwardly. It will provide. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. I will call Braden, she said, reaching for her phone. I will tell him you agreed. He will be so happy. He can bring the papers over tonight. No, I said sharply. She stopped, phone in hand. Not tonight, I said. I need a few days. To pack. To say goodbye to your mother. To the roses. Of course, she said quickly. Take a few days. Take the week. But we need to sign by Friday. Braden has the investors lined up. Friday, I said. I looked at her one last time. I memorized her face, because the next time she saw me, I would not be her father. I would be her landlord, and I would be the man holding the eviction notice for this very house. I walked to the door. "Dad," she called out. I stopped, but I did not turn around. "I love you," she said. I stood there for a long moment. I wanted to say it back. I wanted to lie one more time, but the words stuck in my throat. "I know you do, Zoe," I said, "but you love things more." I walked out the door and closed it behind me. I walked down the long paved driveway to my rusted truck. I climbed in and started the engine. It roared to life, a defiant growl that echoed off the stucco walls of the mansion. I had 48 hours until the eviction notice expired. I had 4 days until Friday. I pulled my phone out. I called Marcus. "How is the acquisition coming?" I asked. "We are closing in an hour," Marcus said. "You just need to sign the wire transfer." $50 million, Thad. Are you sure? I looked back at the house. I saw Zoe in the window talking excitedly on the phone, probably telling Braden to order the Porsche. "I am sure," I said. And Marcus, "Yes, Thad. I want you to buy the note on her car too. Buy all of it. Every debt they have. I want to own the air they breathe." I put the truck in gear. The gardener was done pruning. It was time to chop down the tree. The leather seats of Braden's Audi were soft, but the ride felt like I was being transported in a hearse. We drove in silence for 30 minutes, leaving the manicured lawns of his gated community far behind. The scenery changed, the trees disappeared, the roads became potholed and cracked. We were heading into the industrial district, a place where the city hid the things it did not want to see. Warehouses, scrapyards, and Golden Meadows senior living. When Braden pulled into the parking lot, my heart sank like a stone in deep water. The brochure he had shown me at the party featured sunlight and smiling nurses. The reality was a single-story brick building that looked like a minimum security prison that had lost its funding. The grass was dead. The windows were barred. A single flickering fluorescent light buzzed over the entrance like a dying insect. "Here we are," Braden announced, turning off the engine. He had that salesman smile plastered on his face again, the one that never reached his eyes. "Paradise awaits Thad." I opened the car door and the smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of institutional despair, urine masked by cheap pine cleaner, boiled cabbage, and underneath it all the faint metallic scent of neglect. I had smelled this before in the tenement hallways of my childhood, but I never thought I would smell it again at the end of my life. I stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel. I looked at the building. "This is it?" I asked. "This is the luxury community," Braden laughed, slamming his door. "Don't let the exterior fool you. It is what is inside that counts. Come on. The director is expecting us." He grabbed my arm. It was not a gentle guide. It was a grip meant to control. He marched me toward the sliding glass doors. Inside, the air was stiflingly hot. The lobby, if you could call it that, consisted of 2 plastic chairs and a vending machine that looked empty. Behind a high counter sat a woman chewing gum and scrolling on her phone. She did not look up when we entered. A door to the right swung open and a man walked out. He was short, sweaty, and wearing a suit that was too tight for his midsection. He saw Braden and his face lit up with recognition. "Braden, my man," the director shouted, opening his arms. "You made it," Rick Braden said, shaking the man's hand vigorously. "Good to see you. This is the package I told you about." He pointed a thumb at me. Rick looked me up and down. He didn't see a person. He saw a bed filler. He saw a monthly check. "Mr. King," he said with a greasy smile, "welcome to Golden Meadows. I am Director Rick. We are going to take good care of you here." I looked at Rick. I had done business with men like him for 40 years. Men who cut corners. Men who used cheap concrete and hoped the building wouldn't collapse before the check cleared. "I want to see the room," I said. My voice was low and steady. "Of course," Rick said, winking at Braden. "The VIP suite. Right this way." They started walking down the main hallway. I followed. The floor was linoleum sticky under my boots. As we walked, I looked into the rooms. The doors were open. I saw elderly men and women sitting in wheelchairs staring at walls. Some were moaning softly. Others were slumped over, asleep or drugged, I couldn't tell which. There was no laughter. There was no life. There were no activities. Just rows of human beings waiting for the clock to run out. I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. This was a warehouse for the discarded. Rick stopped at a heavy metal door at the very end of the corridor. It had a keypad lock. "This wing is for our special residents," Rick explained, punching in a code. Special, I asked. Braden leaned in close. Residents who need extra supervision, Thad. The door buzzed open. We stepped through. This hallway was darker. The smell was stronger here. Rick turned to Braden, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. So this is the one with the wandering issue, Rick asked, pointing at me. Braden nodded solemnly. Yeah. He gets confused, Rick. He thinks he lives in a trailer. He tries to escape to go find his dead wife. You need to keep an eye on him. I don't want him walking out the front door and getting hit by a bus. I clenched my fists. I was standing right there. I was perfectly sane. But Braden was painting a picture of a senile flight risk. He was building the narrative to justify locking me up. I do not wander, I said sharply. And I am not confused. Rick chuckled, patting my shoulder patronizingly. Sure you aren't Mr. King. We hear that all the time. Don't you worry, Braden. We have a room right at the back. No windows. Heavy door. We lock it at 8 p.m. sharp. He won't be going anywhere. No windows, I thought. A cell. He was putting me in a cell. We continued walking. I slowed down my pace. I stopped to look at an old woman in a wheelchair who was crying softly. She had dropped her glasses and couldn't reach them. I bent down to pick them up. My knees protested, but I reached for the frames. Hey! The shout came from behind me. Before I could grab the glasses, a heavy hand shoved me hard between the shoulder blades. I lost my balance. I stumbled forward, my boots slipping on the slick floor. I fell hard, hitting my hip against the wall before sliding to the ground. Pain shot up my leg like a bolt of lightning. I looked up. A large female nurse stood over me, scowling. She was wearing scrubs that looked stained. Move it, Grandpa, she barked. No stopping in the hallway. You are blocking the med cart. I lay there stunned. I had not been shoved like that since I was a boy in the schoolyard. I looked at the nurse. There was no compassion in her eyes. Only irritation. I looked down the hall. Braden and Rick had stopped. They turned around and saw me on the floor. I expected Braden to be angry. I expected him to yell at the nurse for pushing his father-in-law. Even if he hated me, I was still family. But Braden didn't yell. He smiled. He walked back slowly, looking down at me with a mixture of pity and triumph. See, Rick, Braden said, gesturing to my crumpled form. This is what I was talking about. Look at him. He can't even walk down a hallway without falling over. He is frail. He is weak. He needs to be here. But she pushed me. I gritted out, trying to push myself up. The pain in my hip was blinding. She shoved me, Braden. Braden laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Nobody pushed you, Thad. You tripped. You are old. Your legs are giving out. Stop making up stories. It is just the dementia talking. He turned to the nurse. Help him up, he said. But don't be too gentle. He needs to learn to pick up his feet. The nurse grabbed my arm and yanked me up with unnecessary force. I bit my tongue to keep from crying out. I leaned against the wall, breathing heavy. I looked at Braden. In that moment, I saw the truth clearly. This wasn't just about the land. He enjoyed this. He enjoyed seeing the man who had built an empire reduced to a stumbling old fool. He enjoyed the power. Let's keep moving, Rick said, checking his watch. Lunch is in 10 minutes. Boiled ham today. I limped after them. My dignity was bruised, but my mind was sharpening. I was observing everything. I was cataloging every violation, every safety hazard, every act of cruelty. We reached the nurse's station at the center of the wing. Rick stopped to sign some papers. Braden was busy texting, probably telling Zoe that the drop-off was almost complete. I leaned against the counter, trying to take weight off my bad hip. My eyes wandered to the bulletin board behind the desk. It was covered in notices, shift schedules, compliance warnings, a menu for the week. And then I saw it. In the bottom corner of the board, half covered by a flyer for a flu shot clinic, was a framed document. It was the state operating license for the facility. I squinted. My glasses were in my pocket, but I didn't need them to read the bold print. Licensee Golden Meadows, LLC, parent company B, and a healthcare holdings. I knew how corporate structures worked. I had built hundreds of them. I looked closer at the signature of the registered agent at the bottom of the license. It was a scribbled signature, but I recognized the loop of the B. I recognized the sharp, jagged A. I had seen that signature on birthday cards for Zoe. I had seen it on the check Braden used to pay for dinner when he wanted to show off. Braden and Associates. The air left my lungs. Braden didn't just find a cheap nursing home. He owned it, or at least he was a partner. He was moving me into a facility where he profited from every bed. He was going to charge my insurance the maximum rate for substandard care. He was going to drain my savings to pay himself rent. He wasn't just stealing my land. He was turning my life into a revenue stream. He was going to lock me in a windowless room, feed me boiled ham, and cash a check every month for my misery. I looked at Braden. He was laughing at something Rick said. He looked so smug, so secure. He thought he was bringing a sheep to the slaughter. He didn't know he had just brought the wolf into the henhouse. Thad Braden called out, snapping his fingers. "Wake up! Time to sign the admission papers." I pushed myself off the wall. I adjusted my flannel shirt. I limped toward them. "I will sign," I thought. "But I am not signing admission papers. I am signing your death warrant." "Coming, Braden," I said, my voice surprisingly strong. I just wanted to read the menu. Braden rolled his eyes, always thinking about food. "Come on, let's get this over with." I walked into the office. I sat down, and for the first time all day I smiled, because now I knew exactly where to aim the wrecking ball. I did not drive back to the trailer that night. I could not go back to the peace of the lake because there was no peace left in me. There was only the cold, hard rhythm of a jackhammer pounding in my chest. I drove my rusted Ford pickup onto the I-90 heading straight into the heart of Chicago. The city lights rose up before me like a wall of fire. Most men my age see that skyline and think about traffic or noise. I see steel. I see concrete. I see the thousands of hours of sweat and blood it took to raise those towers from the mud. And right in the center of it all, standing 60 stories tall against the black sky, was the King Tower, my tower. I pulled the truck up to the curb right in front of the main entrance. A young valet in a red vest rushed over, waving his arms frantically. He saw the dents in my fender and the mud on my tires, and he assumed I was a delivery driver lost on his route. "Hey, you cannot park here," the boy shouted. "This is a loading zone for VIPs only. Move that junk before I call a tow truck." I put the truck in park and turned off the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. I opened the door and stepped out, my work boots hitting the pavement with a heavy thud. I adjusted my flannel shirt and walked around to the front of the truck. I said, "Move it, old man," the boy snapped, stepping into my path. "Move aside, son," a voice rumbled from the entrance. The boy froze. Standing in the revolving doors was Earl. Earl was the head of security. He was a giant of a man, a former linebacker who had been watching my door for 30 years. His hair was gray now, and he moved a little slower, but his eyes were still sharp. He walked past the stunned valet and stopped in front of me. He looked at my old clothes. He looked at the exhaustion etched into my face. He did not blink. Earl stood at attention and tipped his cap. "Good evening, Mr. King. It has been a long time." "Good evening, Earl," I said. "Keep the truck close. I won't be staying long." Earl turned to the valet, who was now trembling. "Park Mr. King's truck right here in the front spot," Earl ordered. "And if anyone asks you, tell them the owner is in the building." I walked through the revolving doors. The lobby smelled of polished marble and expensive lilies. It was a smell I had tried to forget for 10 years, but tonight it filled my lungs like oxygen. I walked past the reception desk where the night staff stared at me in confusion. They saw a janitor. Earl saw a king. I took the private elevator at the back of the hall. It required a key card that I still kept in my wallet, tucked behind a picture of Lucille. I pressed the card to the reader. The light turned green. The doors slid open. As the elevator rose, my ears popped. Floor 10, floor 20, floor 40. With every passing floor, I felt the weight of Thaddeus the gardener falling away. My posture straightened. The ache in my hip faded into the background. By the time the doors opened on the 60th floor, I was not the old man who had been shoved by a nurse. I was the man who could buy that nurse's future with a signature. The penthouse office was dark. I flipped the switch. The lights flickered on, revealing a room frozen in time. Dust sheets covered the furniture. My mahogany desk sat in the center of the room like a sleeping beast. I walked over and ripped the sheet off the chair. Dust motes danced in the light. I sat down. The leather creaked, welcoming me back. The door to the conference room opened. Marcus walked in. He was holding a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. He did not look surprised to see me sitting in the dark. "I figured you would need this," he said, pouring a drink and sliding it across the desk. I took a sip. It burned. It was good. "Did we get it?" I asked. Marcus smiled. He pulled a thick file from his briefcase and dropped it on the desk. "As of 5 p.m. today, Shadow Corp LLC is the majority shareholder of the Vanguard Trust," he said. "Which means you now own the parent company of Apex Realty. Which means, technically speaking, you are Braden's boss's boss." I opened the file. I traced the organizational chart with my finger. It was a beautiful thing, corporate structure. It hid the truth so well. Does he know? I asked. Marcus shook his head. No. Vanguard is a silent entity. We control the board. We control the assets, but day-to-day operations at Apex haven't changed. Braden thinks he is still working for some faceless investors in New York. Good, I said. Keep it that way. I want him to feel safe. I want him to think the ground is solid right before I pull the floor out. I stood up and walked to the window looking down at the city. From up here, the cars looked like toys. Braden's Audi would be nothing more than a speck of dust. I want a full audit, Marcus, I said. Not just of his work. I want an autopsy of his life. Why is he so desperate to sell my land? Why is he putting me in a budget nursing home when he drives a $100,000 car? The math does not add up. Marcus sighed. He walked over to the window and stood beside me. I did some digging while you were driving in Thad. It is worse than we thought. How bad? Marcus opened another folder. This one was red. Braden is not just living beyond his means, he said. He is underwater. Deep. He got involved in some crypto scheme last year, leveraged the house to buy in. The market crashed. He lost the equity in the mansion in a week. I nodded. That explained the second mortgage. That explained Zoe's desperation. But that is not the worst part, Marcus continued. He tried to win it back. He started gambling, online poker at first, then he moved to the underground rooms in the warehouse district. I turned to look at Marcus. Who does he owe? Marcus hesitated. He owes the outfit Thad. The Russo brothers. I closed my eyes. The Russos were not bankers. They were loan sharks who broke kneecaps for interest payments. How much? I asked. $2 million, Marcus said. And the interest is compounding weekly. They gave him a deadline. December 26th. If he doesn't pay by the day after Christmas, they are going to start taking assets, and since the house is already leveraged to the hilt, they will take his life, I finished. Or Zoe's, Marcus said softly. The room went cold. So that is why he needs the land, I said. He needs the $5 million from the condo development to pay off the mob. He isn't selling my home to buy Zoe a Porsche. He is selling it to save his own skin. And he is using your insurance money from the nursing home to make the VIG payments, Marcus added. He gets a kickback for every patient he admits to Golden Meadows, that $3,000 a month from your policy that is going straight into his pocket to keep the wolves at bay for another week. I slammed my hand down on the desk. The glass of bourbon rattled. He is feeding me to a warehouse of dying people to pay for his poker habit, I growled. And he is dragging my daughter into the crossfire. I looked at the file again. I saw the timeline. December 26th. He thinks he has until the day after Christmas, I said. Marcus nodded. He is counting on the eviction going through this Friday. He needs to break ground next week to get the advance from the investors. I walked back to the desk and sat down. I pulled a pen from my pocket. It was a cheap plastic pen, the kind they give away at banks, but tonight it felt like a sword. Freeze him, I said. Marcus blinked. What? I want you to choke him, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I want you to use our position at Vanguard to initiate a compliance review of all his current projects, halt all his commissions, freeze his expense accounts, flag every transaction he tries to make. But Thad Marcus warned if we cut off his cash flow now, he will panic. The Russos will get impatient. Let him panic, I said, leaning forward. I want him terrified. I want him to feel the walls closing in. I want him to come to me on Christmas morning not as a conqueror, but as a beggar. And the land, Marcus asked. The land is the bait, I said. Let the eviction proceed. Let him think he has won. Let him bring the bulldozers. I looked at the picture of Lucille on my desk. Her smile gave me strength. He wants to sell my home to pay his debts, I whispered. Fine. I will help him pay his debts. But the currency is going to be his career. I stood up. I am going back to the trailer, Marcus. I have to pack. You are actually moving out? Marcus asked, surprised. I smiled. A wolfish grin. No, I am just clearing the decks for battle. If he wants a war on Christmas, he's going to get one. But tell the board to be ready. On December 25th, King Holdings is going to have a very public hostile takeover. I walked to the elevator. Earl was waiting in the lobby. He opened the door for me. Everything all right, Mr. King? Earl asked. I looked at the city lights reflecting in the glass doors. Everything is perfect, Earl, I said. The foundation is cracked, but we are going to pour some new concrete. I got into my old truck. As I drove away from the tower, I didn't look like a gardener anymore. I looked like the man who owned the pavement beneath my wheels. Braden had made a fatal mistake. He thought he was playing Monopoly with a senile old man. He didn't know he was playing poker with the house. And the house always wins. The morning sun hit the aluminum siding of my Airstream with a brilliance that felt deceptive. Outside, the world was bright and crisp, but inside I was waiting for a storm. I sat at my small dinette table, sipping coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. My phone lay on the table face down like a playing card I wasn't ready to reveal. I checked my watch. It was 9:15 in the morning. At exactly 9 o'clock, Marcus had made the call. Acting on my orders as the new majority shareholder of the Vanguard Trust, he had instructed the risk management department of our subsidiary bank to contact Braden Reynolds. The message was simple and devastating. Mr. Reynolds, your collateral is no longer sufficient to cover your leverage position. We require additional tangible assets immediately, or we will be forced to call in the loan. I closed my eyes and imagined the scene. I pictured Braden sitting in his glass-walled office, surrounded by leased furniture, holding a phone that felt like a grenade. I pictured the blood draining from his face. He did not have additional assets. He had a leased car, a mortgaged house, and a mountain of gambling debt. He had nothing, except me, except my land. I took a sip of the cold coffee. It tasted bitter. I did not have to wait long. At 9:45 I heard the sound. It wasn't the smooth purr of his engine this time. It was the screech of tires fighting for traction on gravel. He was driving too fast. He was driving like a man running from a fire. I stayed seated. I did not lock the door. A lock only stops an honest man, and Braden was far from honest. The car skidded to a halt just inches from my bumper. I heard the door slam. Then I heard his footsteps stomping up the metal stairs. He didn't knock. He didn't call out. He kicked the door open. The flimsy metal latch gave way with a snap. The door banged against the interior wall, shaking the entire trailer. Braden stood in the doorway. He looked like a man unraveling. His tie was loosened, his hair was wild, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving as if he had run all the way from the city. "Where is it?" he screamed. I looked at him calmly. I did not stand up. "Where is what, Braden?" I asked, my voice steady. "The deed," he yelled, stepping into the small space. He filled the room with his manic energy. "The deed to the land, and the power of attorney. I know you have them here." He didn't wait for an answer. He lunged at the cabinets above the sink. He ripped them open. Cans of soup and boxes of tea spilled onto the floor. He swept his arm across the counter, sending my drying rack clattering against the wall. "Braden, stop this," I said, forcing a tremor into my voice. "You are scaring me." "I don't care," he roared, turning to face me. He looked deranged. "I need those papers signed, Thad, today." Right now, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled document. He slammed it onto the table in front of me. "Sign it," he commanded. I looked down. It was the transfer of deed. It ceded all rights of my 5 acres to a holding company controlled by him. I don't understand," I stammered, shrinking back into my seat. "You said Friday. You said I had until Friday." "Plans changed," he screamed. He grabbed the front of my flannel shirt and yanked me forward. The fabric tore. "I need it now. Do you hear me? I need this asset on my books by noon, or they are going to—" He stopped. He caught himself. He couldn't tell me about the bank call. He couldn't tell me about the mob. "They are going to what?" "Braden," I whispered, making my eyes wide with fear. He let go of my shirt, pushing me back against the seat. "They are going to cancel the development," he lied, breathless. "The investors, they are getting cold feet. If we don't lock this in today, the deal dies. And if the deal dies, Zoe doesn't get her money. Do you want to disappoint your daughter? Do you want to be the reason she cries on Christmas?" He was using her again, using my love for her as a weapon. I looked at the mess on the floor. My tomato soup, my chamomile tea. The simple things that made up my life were now trash under his expensive shoes. I looked at the shelf next to the window. There sat a small framed photo of Lucille. It was from our honeymoon. She was laughing, her hair blowing in the wind. Braden saw me looking at it. He grabbed the photo. "Is this what you care about?" he sneered. "A dead woman, a memory. Braden, please, I begged, reaching out a shaking hand. Don't touch her. He threw the frame across the room. It hit the opposite wall and shattered. The glass rained down on the linoleum. Sign the paper, he screamed. Or I swear to God, Thad, I will burn this tin can to the ground with you inside it. I looked at the broken glass. I looked at Lucille's smiling face lying face down on the floor. A fire ignited in my gut. A cold, dark rage. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to grab him by his throat and throw him through the window. I wanted to tell him that I owned the bank that was squeezing him. I wanted to tell him that I was the one tightening the noose. But not yet. If I fought back now, he would know. He would run. And I needed him to stay. I needed him to dig the hole so deep that he could never climb out. So I let the fire burn inside me, but I kept my face frozen in terror. I slumped my shoulders. I let my hands shake violently. I let a tear roll down my cheek. Okay, I whispered brokenly. Okay, Braden. Please, don't hurt me. I'll sign. Braden's face relaxed slightly. He pulled a pen from his pocket and jammed it into my hand. Do it, right there, next to the X. I held the pen. I hovered over the paper. Braden leaned in, holding his breath. He was so close I could smell the fear sweat on him. I touched the pen to the paper. I made a small mark. Then I stopped. I squinted. I pulled the paper closer. I pushed it away. What are you doing? He snapped. Write your name. I can't see the line, I said, my voice trembling. It is too blurry. My eyes, the cataracts are bad today. Put on your glasses, he yelled. I patted my chest pocket. I patted my pants. I looked around the table frantically. I don't have them, I whined. I left them. Oh no. I left them at Zoe's house, on the kitchen counter. Remember? When I was looking at the magazine, Braden stared at me. His jaw clenched. His face turned a dangerous shade of purple. You left your glasses at Zoe's house. I can't see without them, Braden, I pleaded. I can't sign a legal document if I can't see what I am signing. It won't be valid. The notary will reject it. Braden screamed. It was a primal sound of frustration. He kicked the table leg. You useless old idiot, he shouted. He looked at his watch. It was 10:30. I can go get them, I offered, trying to stand up. My truck is slow, but... No, he barked, pushing me back down. You are not driving anywhere. You will get lost. You will take 3 hours. He ran his hand through his hair, pulling at the roots. He was calculating. He needed to get to Zoe's house, get the glasses, and get back here. It was a 40-minute drive each way. I will go, he spat. I will go get your stupid glasses. He pointed a finger in my face. You stay here. You do not move. You do not call anyone. You sit right there and you wait for me. If you are not in that chair when I get back... He didn't finish the threat. He didn't have to. He turned and stormed out of the trailer. I heard his car start. I heard the gravel fly as he sped away. I sat there in the silence. I waited until the sound of his engine faded completely. Then I stood up. My hands stopped shaking. My posture straightened. I walked over to the broken picture frame. I knelt down and picked up the photo of Lucille. I brushed the glass off her face. I am sorry, Lucy, I whispered. I had to let him break it. I had to let him think he broke me. I placed the photo carefully on the table. Then I walked to the drawer under the sink. I opened it. There, right on top of a stack of napkins, were my reading glasses. I hadn't left them at Zoe's. I never left them anywhere. I put them on. The room came into sharp focus. I saw the soup cans on the floor. I saw the dent in the wall where the frame had hit. I looked at the document he had left on the table. The transfer of deed. I picked up the pen. I wasn't going to sign it. Not today. When he came back, I would tell him I felt sick. I would tell him my hand was too cramped to hold the pen. I would tell him anything to stall him until tomorrow. And then tomorrow, I would have another excuse. I needed to drag this out. I needed to keep him running back and forth, terrified and desperate, until the 25th. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus. He just left, I said. He is in full panic mode. Good, Marcus said. The bank just sent him a second notice. We froze his corporate credit card 10 minutes ago. He tried to buy gas and it was declined. Excellent. Thad Marcus asked, his voice serious. Are you okay? He sounded violent. He broke your picture frame. Marcus, I said, looking at the shattered glass. There was a silence on the line. Marcus knew what that meant. He knew how much I loved that photo. Thad, do not worry, Marcus, I said, my voice cold as the lake in winter. He broke the frame. But he just bought himself a lifetime of bad luck. Increase the pressure, I ordered. Call the investors. Tell them there are rumors of insolvency at Apex. I want him fighting fires on every front. I want him so exhausted he can't think straight. And the eviction notice, Marcus asked. Let it stand, I said. I want him to think he still has one card left to play. I hung up. I started cleaning up the soup cans. I swept up the glass. I put the trailer back in order. When Braden came back an hour later sweating and clutching a pair of old sunglasses he found at Zoe's house because my real glasses were hidden in my drawer, I would be sitting there waiting. I would be the confused, helpless old man he wanted to see. But behind the thick lenses of those glasses I would be watching him. I would be counting the beads of sweat on his forehead. I would be measuring his fear. And I would be smiling on the inside. Because the trap was set. The bait was taken. And the financial jaws were beginning to close. The snow was falling hard on Christmas Eve, burying the city of Chicago in a blanket of white silence. But there was no silence at the Reynolds estate. As I pulled my rusted Ford pickup up the long, heated driveway, the house was vibrating with light and noise. It looked less like a home and more like a department store display. Every tree in the yard was wrapped in thousands of twinkling lights. A 20-foot inflatable Santa waved from the roof. It was a display of wealth so aggressive it felt desperate, and I knew exactly why. Braden was trying to convince the world and himself that he was still the king of the castle. He did not know that the castle was built on quicksand, and I was the one holding the shovel. I parked my truck right next to a silver Bentley. The valet, a young kid shivering in a windbreaker, looked at my vehicle with horror. He started to wave me away, but I just stepped out and tossed him a $20 bill. Leave it, I said. It adds character to the neighborhood. I adjusted my flannel shirt. It was the same red and black plaid I had worn for 20 years. It was clean and pressed, but compared to the tuxedos and evening gowns heading toward the front door, I looked like I had come to fix the furnace, which in a way I had. I was about to turn up the heat until the whole place burned down. I walked up the steps. I could hear the music thumping through the heavy oak doors. Jazz, expensive jazz. I rang the bell. The door was opened, not by Zoe or Braden, but by a caterer holding a tray of champagne. He looked at me, looked at my boots, and hesitated. "Deliveries are around the back, sir," he said. "I am not a delivery," I said, pushing past him. "I am the father of the hostess." I stepped into the foyer. The heat hit me first, then the smell. Pine needles, expensive perfume, and the underlying metallic scent of anxiety. The house was packed. There must have been 50 people in the living room alone. I recognized the type. These were Braden's people. Investors. Real estate sharks. Men who wore loafers with no socks. And women whose faces were frozen in permanent expressions of surprise. They were holding crystal glasses and laughing at jokes that were not funny. When I walked in, the conversation in the immediate vicinity died. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. I saw the whispers start. "Who let the homeless man in? Is that the gardener?" I kept my head high. I walked with the slow, deliberate gait of a man who has walked steel beams 60 stories in the air. I was not ashamed of who I was. I was ashamed of who they were. Zoe spotted me from across the room. She was wearing a green velvet dress that hugged her frame and a necklace that sparkled under the chandelier. It was the diamond tennis bracelet, the one Braden had bought with the stolen insurance money. Seeing it around her neck felt like seeing a noose. She rushed over her heels, clicking on the marble floor. She grabbed my arm and pulled me into an alcove near the coat closet. "Dad," she hissed. "What are you wearing?" "Clothes, Zoe," I said. "It is cold outside." "You have a suit," she said, her voice tight with embarrassment. "You wore a suit to the hotel. Why did you wear this?" "Braden's boss is here. The investors are here. You look like you just came from a lumber yard." "I came from my home," I said. "This is who I am, Zoe. You used to like this shirt. You used to say it smelled like sawdust and safety." "That was a long time ago," she snapped, looking over her shoulder to see if anyone was watching. "Please, just stay in the kitchen, or go to the den. Do not mingle. Braden is on edge tonight." I looked at her. She was terrified. Not of me, but of him. "Where is your husband?" I asked. "He is by the bar," she said. "And Dad, please. If he asks about the papers, just say yes. Just keep him calm. He has been drinking since noon." I nodded. "I will keep him calm." I walked into the main room. I felt like a dark cloud moving through a field of sunflowers. People parted to let me through, clutching their purses and drinks a little tighter. I heard a woman whisper how quaint as I passed. I ignored them. I was looking for the man of the hour. I found Braden at the wet bar in the sunken living room. He was holding court surrounded by a group of men in tuxedos. He was laughing too loud. His face was flushed a deep, unhealthy red. He was holding a glass of scotch in one hand and gripping the edge of the bar with the other as if the floor was moving beneath him. He saw me. His eyes widened. For a second I saw fear, pure unadulterated panic. He knew the deadline was in 36 hours. He knew the Russo brothers were sharpening their knives. But then the fear was replaced by anger. He hated that he needed me. He hated that his survival depended on the old man in the flannel shirt. Thad, he boomed, spreading his arms wide. The crowd turned to look. Look, everyone, my father-in-law has arrived, and he dressed up for the occasion, I see. The group laughed. It was a cruel, sycophantic sound. Braden walked over to me. He stumbled slightly but caught himself. He put a heavy arm around my shoulder, leaning his weight on me. He smelled of alcohol and sweat. Merry Christmas. Thad, he whispered in my ear. Did you bring it? Did you bring the signed deed? I pulled away slightly. Merry Christmas, Braden, I said. I left the papers at the trailer. I thought we shouldn't talk business on the Lord's Day. Braden's grip on my shoulder tightened. His fingers dug into my trapezius muscle. You old son of a bitch, he hissed. You are playing games with me. Do you know what happens on the 26th? Do you know what happens if I do not have that asset? I looked him in the eye. I knew exactly what happened. I knew about the foreclosure notice sitting in my truck. I knew about the compliance freeze I had ordered on his accounts. I suppose we will find out, I said calmly. Braden looked like he was going to hit me. His jaw worked furiously. But then he looked around. He saw his investors watching. He saw Sterling watching. He couldn't beat an old man in front of his ticket to freedom. He had to humiliate me instead. He had to destroy me socially since he couldn't destroy me physically yet. He turned back to the room. He raised his glass. Everyone, he shouted. Attention, please. The music stopped. The chatter died down. 100 faces turned toward us. Braden stood there swaying slightly with his arms still draped around me like a loving son. I want to propose a toast, Braden said. To family. Hear, hear, someone shouted. Family is a burden, Braden continued, his voice slurring slightly. I mean, a blessing. But let's be honest. Sometimes it is a heavy load to carry. He looked down at me, smiling a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Take Thad here, my father-in-law. We invited him to this beautiful party in our beautiful home because we are good people. We are charitable people, even though he refuses to help himself. Even though he chooses to live in a tin can and dress like a hobo, he is still, technically, family. There were a few uncomfortable coughs from the crowd, but most people just watched, mesmerized by the train wreck. Zoe stepped forward from the crowd. Braden, stop, she whispered. Braden ignored her. He held his glass higher. You know Thad? I have been thinking about gifts, he said, looking down at me with pure venom in his eyes. I have given you everything. I paid for your nursing home. I offered to develop your land. I have tried to drag you into the 20th century. But you are just an anchor. You are a dead weight dragging my wife and me down. He leaned in close, his face inches from mine. The room was deadly silent. So I was thinking, Braden said, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper that echoed in the quiet room. The best gift you could give us, the only gift I really want, is for you to stop existing. I froze. The guests froze. Just disappear, Braden said. Go to the nursing home. Go to the grave. I don't care. Just stop being here. Stop being a burden. You are an embarrassment, Thad. You are a stain on this family, and we are all just waiting for you to fade away so we can finally be happy. He laughed. A short, sharp bark of a laugh. Merry Christmas, old man. Miss Old. He drank his scotch in one gulp. I stood there. I felt the blood draining from my face. I had been insulted before. I had been spit on during the civil rights marches. I had been called every name in the book by foremen and rivals. But this was different. This was the man who had sworn to protect my daughter, wishing for my death in front of a room full of strangers. I looked at the crowd. I expected to see shock. I expected to see someone step forward and defend me. But they didn't. They looked at their shoes. They looked at their drinks. They were uncomfortable, but they were not on my side. They were Braden's people. They respected the suit, not the man. Then I looked at Zoe, my daughter, my little girl. She was standing next to Braden. She looked at him, then she looked at me. She saw the guests watching her. She had a choice in that moment. She could slap him. She could walk out. She could stand by her father. But she didn't. She looked at the guests, and she let out a small, nervous giggle. "Oh, Braden," she said, her voice high and fake. "You are terrible when you drink. He doesn't mean it, Dad. He is just joking." She smiled. She laughed. She sided with the monster because she was afraid of losing the mansion. That laugh broke me. It shattered the last piece of hope I had been holding on to. I looked down at my hand. I was holding a glass of red wine that a waiter had handed me earlier. I was gripping it so hard my knuckles were white. I felt the rage rising up from my boots. It was a physical thing, a wave of heat. Stop existing. That is what he wanted. I looked at Braden. He was smirking, waiting for me to cry or leave. I didn't cry. I squeezed my hand. Crack! The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. The crystal goblet shattered in my palm. Shards of glass bit into my skin. Red wine exploded outward, mixing with the bright red blood that instantly began to flow from my hand. The liquid splattered onto the white carpet. It splattered onto Braden's beige pants. He jumped back. What the hell? I didn't let go of the broken stem. I held it like a weapon. Blood dripped down my wrist, staining the cuff of my plaid shirt. I looked at the blood. It was dark and rich. Real blood. Not the fake blue blood these people pretended to have. I looked up at Braden. My eyes were not the eyes of a confused old man anymore. They were the eyes of the wolf. "You want me to stop existing?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. I took a step toward him. He took a step back, tripping over his own feet. "Be careful what you wish for, Braden," I whispered. "Because ghosts tend to haunt the people who killed them." I dropped the broken glass on the floor. It landed with a wet thud. I turned to Zoe. She was staring at my bleeding hand, her face pale. "Dad, your hand," she whimpered. "Don't worry about it," I said coldly. "It is just blood. We don't share it anymore." I turned and walked out of the room. The crowd parted from me like the Red Sea. No one said a word. I left a trail of red drops on the marble floor, a map of my pain leading all the way to the door. I walked out into the snow. The cold air stung my open wound, but I didn't feel it. I got into my truck. I wrapped my hand in an old rag from the dashboard. I started the engine. Braden wanted a gift. He wanted me to disappear. Tomorrow morning I would give him exactly what he asked for. But first I had one more stop to make. I pulled my phone out with my good hand. I called Marcus. "Initiate the foreclosure," I said. And Marcus, yes, Thad, canceled the Christmas bonus for Apex Realty. I want him to wake up to an empty stocking. I drove away from the mansion, leaving the lights and the lies behind me. The snow was falling harder now, covering my tracks. By morning the gardener would be gone, and the landlord would arrive. Christmas morning usually brings a silence that feels holy, a quiet blanket of white snow that muffles the noise of the world and lets you hear your own heartbeat. But inside the Reynolds mansion, the silence was not holy. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a bomb squad waiting for the red wire to be cut. I had spent the night in my truck, parked down the street, refusing to stay under a roof where I was not welcome. But I came back at 8 in the morning, just as Braden had demanded. I walked through the front door, my boots leaving wet prints on the marble prints that I knew would be scrubbed away by a maid who was paid less in a year than the rug she was cleaning cost. The living room was a wreckage of the night before. Empty champagne bottles stood like gravestones on the coffee table. Half-eaten canapes were hardening on silver trays. The air smelled of stale alcohol and dying pine needles. Sitting in the middle of this debris like a king on a throne of garbage was Braden. He was wearing a silk robe that hung open, revealing a chest that had never seen a day of hard labor. He was nursing a mug of black coffee and staring at the wall, his leg bouncing with a nervous energy that vibrated through the floorboards. Zoe was there too, curling up on the sofa, wrapped in a cashmere blanket. She looked small. She looked like a child hiding from a thunderstorm. When I walked in, she looked up and I saw the guilt flash across her face before she buried it under a mask of indifference. She did not say Merry Christmas. She did not ask about my hand, which was wrapped in a bloody bandage. She just looked at Braden, waiting for him to start the show. Braden turned his head slowly. His eyes were red-rimmed, bloodshot maps of the stress he was trying to drown. He did not smile. He did not offer me coffee. He reached down to the floor and picked up a thick manila folder. He threw it across the coffee table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right at the edge, inches from my knees. "Sign it," he croaked. His voice was rough, ravaged by the scotch and the screaming. I looked down at the folder. I knew what was inside. It was the deed transfer. It was the legal instrument that would strip me of the 5 acres I had promised Lucille I would never sell. It was the document that would turn my rose garden into a condo complex and my home into a pile of scrap metal. Braden stood up. He walked over to me, his bare feet slapping against the expensive rug. He pulled a pen from his robe pocket. It was a gold Mont Blanc, the kind of pen men use when they want to feel important. He clicked it. The sound echoed in the quiet room. "Here," he said, shoving it toward my chest. "The notary is coming at 10, but I want your signature on it now. I want to see the ink dry." And then what I asked. My voice was calm, steady. It did not sound like the voice of a man about to lose everything. It sounded like a judge reading a sentence. "Then the van comes?" Braden said. He gestured vaguely toward the window. "The transport from Golden Meadows. They are picking you up at 11. I packed a bag for you. It is in the hallway. 2 shirts, 2 pants, and your toothbrush. That is all you need. You won't need the work boots where you are going." I looked at Zoe. She was staring at her hands, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. "Is this what you want, Zoe?" I asked. "You are sending your father away on Christmas Day." She didn't look up. "It is for the best, Dad," she whispered. Braden says the facility has a nice holiday dinner. Turkey and everything." "Turkey," I repeated. I looked back at Braden. He was smirking. He thought he had won. He thought the game was over. He had the power, he had the house, he had the girl, and I was just the final loose end to be snipped off. "Sign it," Old Man Braden snapped. "Stop stalling. I have a headache and I don't have the patience for your sentimental garbage today." I reached out and took the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. Cold. I sat down in the armchair opposite him. I opened the folder. The paper was crisp and white. Transfer of deed. Grantor Thaddeus King. Grantee Apex Realty Holdings. I looked at the line where my name was supposed to go. Braden leaned over me, his breath smelling of stale coffee and mint toothpaste. He was watching like a hawk. He needed this. He needed it to pay the mob. He needed it to save his skin. I lowered the pen to the paper. I didn't shake. I didn't hesitate. But I didn't sign my name. Instead, I printed a series of numbers and letters, precise, blocky characters, the kind of writing you learn when you have to mark blueprints so the guys in the back row can read them. 881-2-TERM. I put a period at the end. I capped the pen. I set it down on top of the folder. "There," I said. Braden snatched the folder up instantly. He was practically vibrating with greed. He looked at the page expecting to see Thaddeus King scrawled in shaky cursive. He froze. He squinted. He brought the paper closer to his face. "What the hell is this?" he asked. He looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. 8812-TERM, he read aloud. "What is this? Is this some kind of code? Are you having a stroke? I told you to sign your name, you senile old bat." I leaned back in the chair. I crossed my legs. I looked him right in the eye. "It is a code, Braden," I said, "but not a secret one." "What are you talking about?" he shouted, throwing the folder back at me. "Papers flew everywhere. Sign it properly. It is an employee identification number," I explained, my voice dropping an octave, getting lower, getting darker. "Specifically, it is the ID number for a senior executive at Apex Realty." Braden stopped shouting. He stared at me. "How do you know about employee ID numbers?" he asked slowly. "I know a lot of things," I said. "I know that Apex Realty uses a 4-digit prefix for their personnel files. 8812. That is you, Braden. That is your file number." He laughed. It was a nervous, jerky sound. "So what? You memorized my file number from a pay stub. You think that makes you smart. You are just a creep digging through my trash." And the letters, I continued, ignoring his insult. "TERM. Do you know what that stands for in the HR database, Braden?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly open. "It stands for terminated," I said. The room went dead silent. Even Zoe stopped picking at the blanket and looked up. "Terminated," Braden whispered. Then he laughed again, louder this time, more aggressive. "You are insane. You are actually insane. You think you can fire me. You, the gardener, the man who lives in a tin can. He walked around the coffee table, pacing back and forth, waving his arms. Listen to me, you delusional old relic, he shouted. I am the director of sales. I am a partner. I bring in millions of dollars a year. Nobody fires me. I am the one who hires and fires. I am the one who calls the shots. He stopped in front of me, leaning down until our noses were almost touching. I run this town, he hissed. You are nothing. You are a bug I am crushing under my shoe. Now pick up that pen and sign your name, or so help me God, I will have the orderlies strap you to a gurney and I will forge it myself. I looked at him. I looked at the arrogance dripping off him like sweat. He truly believed it. He truly believed that a suit and a leased car made him a king. He had no idea that he was standing in the shadow of the man who built the castle. I picked up the pen. I am not signing, Braden, I said. He raised his hand as if to strike me. I am not signing because that document is invalid, I said. Invalid, he screamed. My lawyers drew it up. Your lawyers work for Apex, I said. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, I paused. I checked my old battered wristwatch. As of 9 o'clock this morning, you do not work for Apex. Braden stared at me. The color began to drain from his face. Not because he believed me, but because of the absolute certainty in my voice. He had expected begging. He had expected tears. He had expected a broken old man pleading for his home. Instead, he was facing a stone wall. You are lying, he whispered. You are trying to scare me. Am I asked. I reached into the pocket of my flannel shirt. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a printout of an email. I had Marcus send it to me an hour ago. I unfolded it and placed it gently on the table. It was a corporate memo. The header read, The Vanguard Trust. Internal memorandum. Subject immediate termination of Braden Reynolds. Cause embezzlement and gross misconduct. Braden looked at the paper. He didn't touch it. He looked like it was radioactive. Vanguard, he breathed. How do you have this? This is internal. This is impossible. I stood up. I towered over him. For the first time, he realized that despite my age, I was still 6'2" and built from years of hauling concrete. I saw it in your file, I said. Because I asked for your file. You asked for it. He stammered, backing away. Who are you? I am the man you tried to bury, I said. Braden shook his head violently. No. No, no, no. You are a gardener. You are nobody. He turned to Zoe. He is lying. Zoe, tell him he is lying. He printed this off the internet. He is trying to ruin Christmas. Zoe looked at the paper. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide with a dawning horror. She knew I didn't use the internet. She knew I didn't own a printer. Dad, she whispered, what is going on? Braden lunged for his phone on the bar counter. His hands were shaking so hard he dropped it twice before he could unlock it. I am calling Sterling, he yelled. I am calling the CEO. I am going to have you arrested for corporate espionage. You are going to jail, old man. Go ahead, I said, sitting back down. Call him. Braden dialed. He put it on speakerphone. The ringing sound filled the room. 1 ring, 2 rings. Braden looked at me with a triumphant sneer. Watch this, he said. Watch me end you. 3 rings. Then the line clicked open. Braden. It was Sterling's voice, but it didn't sound friendly. It sounded cold, terrified. Sterling Braden shouted, You have to help me. My father-in-law is here. He has some fake memo. He says I'm fired. Tell him who I am. Sterling. Tell him I am the director. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, a silence that was heavier than the one in the room. Braden Sterling said, his voice trembling, You need to shut up. What Braden asked, confused. You need to shut up and listen to me, Sterling said. Security is on their way up to your office right now. They are boxing up your desk. Braden went white. What are you talking about, Sterling? This is a joke, right? It is not a joke, Braden Sterling said. The board met this morning. An emergency session. The new majority shareholder called it. They have everything, Braden. The crypto, the gambling debts, the insurance fraud with the nursing home. They have the receipts, the new shareholder, Braden whispered. Who? Who is it? I don't know, Sterling said. Some holding company called Shadow Corp. But Braden, they didn't just fire you. They are pressing charges. The police are on their way to your house. The phone slipped from Braden's hand. It hit the floor with a crack. He stood there swaying. His world, the world of expensive suits and country clubs and arrogance, was crumbling into dust around him. He looked at me. "Shadow Corp," he whispered. I leaned forward. I rested my elbows on my knees. I looked him dead in the eye. "That is right, Braden," I said. And then I smiled. A cold, hard smile. "And do you know who owns Shadow Corp?" Braden shook his head, mute with terror. I pointed to the flannel shirt he hated so much. I pointed to the work boots he called an embarrassment. "The gardener does," I said. The silence that followed was total. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of the drop. Braden fell to his knees. The silence in the room was brittle like a sheet of ice just before it cracks under the weight of a boot. Braden was on his knees, but his arrogance had not completely left him yet. It was a stubborn thing, arrogance. It clung to him like the smell of the expensive scotch he had been drinking all night. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled onto a dock. He wanted to scream. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to call my bluff because in his small, narrow world, gardeners did not buy corporations and old men in flannel shirts did not destroy executives. He convinced himself in that split second that I was lying, that the memo was a forgery, that the employee code was just a lucky guess. "You are crazy," Braden whispered, pushing himself up from the floor. His knees popped. He smoothed his silk robe, trying to regain the dignity of the master of the house. "You are a senile old man having a psychotic break. That is what this is. You printed a fake email to scare me." He turned to Zoe, who was curled in the corner of the sofa, her face pale as the snow outside. "Zoe, call the police." Braden ordered, his voice shaking but gaining volume. "Your father has lost his mind. He is threatening me. He is forging corporate documents. Call them now. I want him removed from my property." Zoe did not move. She looked at the paper on the table. Then she looked at me. She saw the calm in my eyes. She saw the way I sat in the armchair, not like a guest, but like a judge. Deep down, she knew. She remembered the man who raised her. She remembered that I never bluffed. But Braden was not ready to accept his fate. He reached for his phone on the floor where he had dropped it. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb of glass over the glowing display. "I will call Sterling myself," he spat. "I will put him on video. I will let him tell you to your face that I am his star employee. And then I am going to sue you, Thad. I am going to sue you for slander until you don't even own the shirt on your back." He tapped the screen with trembling fingers. He pressed the contact for Sterling's CEO. The phone began to ring. The sound was amplified in the quiet room. A digital trill that sounded like a countdown. One ring. Braden looked at me, a sneer twisting his lips. He held the phone out like a shield. 2 rings. "Pick up," Braden muttered. "Pick up and tell this old fool who runs this town." 3 rings. Then the call connected. But before Braden could say a word, before he could launch into his tirade, a voice cut through the speaker. It was not the smooth, confident voice of Sterling, the CEO, that Braden was used to. It was a voice tight with panic, a voice that sounded like a man who was watching a tsunami hit the shore. Braden Sterling's voice cracked through the speaker. "Thank God you answered. Where are you?" Braden puffed out his chest. He shot me a look of triumph. "I am at home, Sterling," he said loud and clear. "And I have my father-in-law here. He is making some insane claims. He says—" "Shut up, Braden," Sterling screamed. The sheer volume of the shout made Braden flinch. He almost dropped the phone again. "What?" Braden stammered. "Shut up and listen to me," Sterling shouted. "Are you at the house? The one on Lakeview?" "Yes," Braden said, confusion clouding his eyes. "Why?" "Get out," Sterling said. "Get out now. The police are on their way." Braden froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like gray ash. "Police," he whispered. "Why? What is happening, Sterling?" Sterling let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "The audit, Braden. The new owners, Shadow Corp. They brought in a forensic accounting team at midnight. They went through everything, the server logs, the wire transfers, the offshore accounts in Malta." Braden began to shake. His hand trembled so violently the phone blurred in the air. That is impossible," Braden squeaked. "Those are encrypted." "Nothing is encrypted when you own the server," Sterling snapped. "They found the $2 million, Braden. They found the transfers to the gambling sites. They found the kickbacks from the nursing home. They found the unauthorized loans you took out in the company's name. No, Braden moaned. No, no, no. I can fix it. I just need a few days. The land deal. There is no land deal, Sterling yelled. Shadow Corp killed the deal 5 minutes ago. They canceled the Golden Meadows contract. They liquidated your portfolio, Braden. It is over. Braden stared at the phone. He looked like he had been shot in the gut. But you can protect me, Braden pleaded. You are the CEO. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I am good for it. I can't protect you, Sterling cried. I am trying to protect myself. They are coming for me too, Braden, because I signed off on your hiring. They are talking about RICO charges. They are talking about federal prison time. You are toxic, Braden. You are radioactive. You are fired. Effective immediately. You are fired and you are being sued for damages, and the feds are 10 minutes away from your door. Click. The line went dead. The silence that rushed back into the room was heavy enough to crush a man. And it did. It crushed Braden Reynolds. He stood there for a second, the phone slipping from his numb fingers. It hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud. He didn't even look at it. He just stared at the wall, his eyes wide and unseeing, his mouth hanging open. The arrogance, the pride, the vanity, it all evaporated, leaving behind a small, terrified child. He turned his head slowly. It moved like a rusted hinge. He looked at me. I was sitting back in the armchair, my legs crossed, one boot resting on my knee. I looked relaxed. I looked comfortable. Braden stared at me with a horror that transcended fear. He looked at my flannel shirt. He looked at my calloused hands. He looked at the man he had called a gardener, a bum, a waste of space. How he whispered. His voice was barely audible. How did you do this? He asked louder, taking a step toward me. He looked at the papers on the table. The memo. The employee code. You orchestrated this, he accused, his voice rising to a shriek. You called them. You told them to look. You planted the evidence. He was unraveling. His mind couldn't accept that he had lost, so he had to invent a conspiracy. I leaned forward. On the coffee table next to the unsigned deed sat a silver tea service. It was an antique Zoe had bought at an auction with money I had given her for her birthday 3 years ago. There was a pot of Earl Grey that had gone cold. I reached out with my good hand. I picked up the delicate china cup. My rough fingers looked out of place against the porcelain, but I held it with perfect stability. I took a sip. It was cold and bitter, but to me, it tasted like victory. I set the cup back on the saucer with a gentle clink. I looked up at Braden. I did not plant anything, Braden, I said. My voice was low, rumbling like the engine of my truck. I did not force you to gamble. I did not force you to steal. I did not force you to treat your wife like an ATM and your father-in-law like a dog. You did this. Braden insisted, tears streaming down his face. You called Sterling. You ruined me. What did you do? I stood up. I smoothed the wrinkles in my shirt. I told you, Braden, I said. I didn't do anything special. I took a step closer to him. He flinched, backing away until he hit the mantel of the fireplace. I just called my employees, I said. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His knees gave out and he slid down the front of the fireplace, landing in a heap on the rug. Your employees, he gasped. Sterling works for me, I said. The auditors work for me. The bank that holds your mortgage works for me. I gestured around the room. And as of this morning, Braden, I own the company that owns the company that you used to work for. I looked down at him. You wanted me to stop existing, I said. You wanted the gardener to disappear. Well, Braden, I have good news. The gardener is gone. I leaned down close to his face. The landlord is here, and rent is due. From the hallway came the sound of sirens, distant at first but getting louder. The wail of the police cars cutting through the Christmas morning air. Braden heard them. He looked at the door. He looked at Zoe. He looked at me. Help me, he whimpered. Dad, please, help me. I stood up straight. I looked at the man who had tried to bury me. I am helping you, Braden, I said. I am teaching you the value of consequences. It is the most expensive education money can buy. I turned my back on him and walked toward the window to watch the flashing blue lights pull into the driveway. The sirens outside were deafening now, a cacophony of wailing mechanical banshees that signaled the end of the charade. blue and red lights flashed through the sheer curtains, painting the living room in chaotic strobes of color. But inside the eye of the storm, there was a stillness that felt heavy enough to crush bone. I turned away from the window where I had been watching the police cars skid into the driveway. I turned back to the two people who had spent the last 5 years treating me like a stain on their perfect white carpet. I looked at Braden huddled on the floor in front of the fireplace, his silk robe looking ridiculous now, like a costume from a play that had been canceled. I looked at Zoe curled on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow to her chest, as if it could protect her from the truth. And then I did something I had not done in a decade. I stood up. I do not mean I simply rose from the chair. I mean I unfolded myself. For 10 years I had walked with a stoop, a slight hunch in my shoulders that came from grief and the desire to be invisible. I had made myself smaller to fit into the tiny box they had built for me. I had let them see the old man, the gardener, the relic. But now, as the police pounded on the heavy oak front door, I let the facade drop. I locked my knees. I rolled my shoulders back until my spine cracked and straightened. I lifted my chin. I seemed to grow 3 inches in height right before their eyes. The weariness vanished from my face, replaced by the iron-hard expression of a man who had stared down union strikes and hostile takeovers in the boardrooms of Chicago. I was no longer Thad the nuisance. I was Thaddeus King the Titan. I walked toward the coffee table. My heavy work boots did not shuffle. They struck the hardwood floor with a rhythmic, authoritative thud that sounded like a gavel striking a bench. Step, step, step. Braden looked up from the floor. His eyes were wide and wet with tears, but there was a new emotion there too. Confusion. He was looking at me, but he did not recognize the man standing in his living room. He saw the flannel shirt, but he could not reconcile it with the aura of power that was suddenly radiating from me. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice trembling. I did not answer him. Not yet. I reached inside my flannel jacket. There was a hidden pocket there, sewn into the lining, a pocket deep enough to hold the weight of an empire. I pulled out a blue leather folder. It was old, the leather worn smooth by years of handling, but the gold leaf stamped on the front still gleamed in the light of the chandelier. I dropped it on the table. It landed with a heavy final thud that silenced the room. It landed right on top of the unsigned eviction notice Braden had tried to force me to sign. "Open it," I commanded. My voice was different. It was not the gravelly whisper of the grandfather. It was a baritone rumble, deep and resonant, the voice of a man who was used to his orders being obeyed without question. Zoe flinched at the sound. She looked at the folder, then up at me. "Dad," she breathed. "What is this?" "Open it, Zoe," I said. "Read it. Read it aloud so your husband can hear who he really tried to evict today." Zoe reached out with a shaking hand. Her manicured fingernails clicked against the leather cover. She opened it. Inside were documents, thick bond paper, watermarked and stamped with official seals. She turned the first page. Her eyes scanned the lines. She frowned. This is a property deed," she said, her voice confused. "For the trailer park." "Keep reading," I said. She read. "Lot 4A. Lakefront parcel, 5 acres. Appraised value." She stopped. She blinked. She brought the paper closer to her face. $52 million, she whispered. Braden scrambled up from the floor. He crawled on his hands and knees to the table. He snatched the paper from Zoe's hand. "That is impossible," he shouted, spittle flying from his mouth. "It is a swamp. It is dirt. It is worth 5 million tops." I looked down at him with cold amusement. "It is dirt." Braden, I agreed. "But it is dirt that sits on top of one of the largest limestone deposits in the state. And it is dirt that is zoned for high-density commercial use, which I secured in 1982. You saw a trailer. You saw weeds. You didn't bother to check the geological survey. You didn't bother to check the zoning rights. You were so busy looking down on me that you didn't look down at the ground." 50 million, Braden gasped, staring at the number. He looked sick. He realized he had been trying to steal pennies from a vault full of gold. "But that is not all," I said. "Turn the page, Zoe." Zoe turned the page. Her hands were shaking so violently now that the paper rattled like a dry leaf in a gale. This is a corporate filing," she said. "Read the name of the company," I ordered. "King Holdings, LLC," she read. "And underneath that," I prompted. "Read the subsidiaries." Zoe's eyes widened. She read the list. King Construction, North Shore Logistics, Chicago Steel and Wire, the Vanguard Trust. She paused. She looked at Braden, then she looked back at the paper. Apex Realty Group, she whispered. The room seemed to tilt. Braden froze. He stopped breathing. Apex, he choked out. No, that's my company. I walked around the table. I stood directly in front of him. I loomed over him, blocking out the light of the Christmas tree. You always mocked my trailer, Braden, I said softly. You called it a tin can. You said it was an eyesore, but you didn't know that the trailer was a choice. I lived there because I wanted to be close to Lucille. I lived there because I didn't need a mansion to know who I was. I pointed a calloused finger at the document in Zoe's hands. But your company, Braden, the company that gave you that lease on your car, the company that pays for this house, the company you bragged about to your friends at the club. I leaned in closer. I bought it in 1995. Braden shook his head. No, you were a gardener. You told us. I never told you I was a gardener, I corrected him. You assumed I was a gardener because you saw me planting roses for my wife. You saw a black man in work boots and your prejudice filled in the rest. You didn't ask. You never asked. I took the paper from Zoe's numb fingers. I held it up. I bought Apex Realty when you were still in middle school stealing lunch money, I said. I built the skyscraper where your office is located. I signed the checks for the construction crew. I approved the acquisition of the firm. Every bonus you ever received, every commission check, every dollar you used to buy those tacky suits came from my bank account. I tossed the paper onto Braden's chest. I have been your boss for 20 years, Braden, and you didn't even know it. Zoe stood up. She looked like she was sleepwalking. She looked at the flannel shirt I was wearing. She looked at the old truck parked outside through the window. Then she looked at the papers. The cognitive dissonance was breaking her. Dad, she whimpered. You are the chairman. I looked at her. I am the founder and chairman of the board of King Holdings, I said. My net worth is not something you discuss at a dinner party, Zoe. It is something you read about in Forbes if you bother to look past the top 10 list. But why, she cried, why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us live like this? Why did you let us think you were poor? Because I wanted to see who you were, I said. My voice cracked just a little with the pain of the truth. I wanted to see if you loved me or my money. When your mother died, I wanted to know if my daughter would take care of her father because he was her father, or if she would only care if he was a checkbook. I looked at the diamond bracelet on her wrist, and I got my answer, I said. You didn't want a father, you wanted an ATM, and when the ATM looked broken, you tried to throw it in the trash. From the hallway came the sound of heavy fists pounding on the door. Police, open up. Warrant for Braden Reynolds. Braden screamed. He scrambled backward, crab-walking away from the door until his back hit the wall. Help me, he begged, looking up at me. Thad. Sir. Mr. King. Please. You own the company. You can stop this. Call them off. Tell them it was an internal error. Please, I am family. I looked down at him. I saw the snot running down his nose. I saw the terror of a man who had never faced a consequence in his life. I walked over to him. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a single quarter. I flicked it at him. It bounced off his chest. Call your lawyer, I said. Then I turned to the door. I walked over and unlocked it. I swung it open. A team of officers stood there, breath fogging in the cold air. Behind them stood Marcus holding a briefcase and looking very pleased. Merry Christmas, Marcus, I said, stepping aside. Merry Christmas, Mr. Chairman, Marcus replied. He pointed at Braden, cowering in the corner. Is that the package? That is him, I said. I looked back at Zoe one last time. She was staring at the corporate seal on the paper, her finger tracing the name King Holdings over and over again as if trying to rewrite history. But the ink was dry, and the check had bounced. The blue lights of the police cruisers strobed against the living room walls, turning the expensive Italian plaster into a disco of crime and punishment. The officers were moving in, reaching for Braden's arms, their handcuffs rattling a metallic song of justice. Braden was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering a sound that cut through the heavy silence of the room. He looked at the door. Then he looked at me. his eyes pleading for a salvation he did not deserve. But before the officers could snap the metal cuffs around his wrists, I raised my hand. "Wait," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The officers stopped. Even Marcus, standing by the doorway, signaled for them to hold. This was my company, this was my house, and this was my moment. Braden looked at me, hope flickering in his terrified eyes. He thought I was going to save him. He thought the old man's heart had softened, that the grandfather in me was going to intervene and make the bad men go away. "Thad," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you. I knew you wouldn't let them take me. We can fix this right. We can work it out." I did not answer him. I walked slowly toward the Christmas tree. It was a 12-foot Douglas fir imported from Oregon, decorated with glass ornaments that cost more than my monthly food budget. Underneath it lay a mountain of gifts, boxes wrapped in gold and silver paper ribbons curled with professional precision. Gifts for Zoe, gifts for his business partners, gifts for himself. There was not a single gift for me under that tree. Not a card, not a pair of socks, nothing. But there was one box that didn't belong. I pointed to a small, flat package tucked near the back. It was wrapped in plain, brown paper. No ribbon, no bow. Just a simple block of darkness amidst the glitter. "I have a gift for you, Braden," I said. Braden blinked, confused. "A gift?" I nodded. "Open it." I motioned for the officers to let him move. He scrambled forward on his hands and knees, crawling across the Persian rug like a broken child. He reached for the brown package. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't get a grip on the paper at first. He clawed at it, tearing the wrapping. Zoe stepped forward, wiping her eyes. She looked at the box, then at me, hope rising in her chest too. She thought maybe it was money. She thought maybe it was a check to cover the debts, to make the nightmare end. Braden ripped the paper off. He revealed a black folder. It was not leather like the corporate dossier I had shown them earlier. It was stiff, textured cardstock, the kind used for legal summons. He opened it. He stared at the first page. I watched his face. I watched the last vestige of color drain away, leaving him looking like a corpse in a silk robe. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He read the bold black letters at the top of the page. Then he read them again, as if his brain refused to process the information. What is this?" he croaked. "Read it." "Braden," I said. He shook his head. "No, this is a mistake." "Read it," I commanded, my voice cracking like a whip. Braden swallowed hard. He looked at the police officers, then at Zoe, then back at the paper. "Notice of default," he whispered. "And immediate foreclosure." Zoe let out a gasp. She ran to his side, grabbing the folder. "Foreclosure," she shrieked. "That is impossible. We pay the mortgage every month. This is a $5 million house. You cannot just foreclose on it." I walked over to the fireplace and leaned against the mantel. I looked at the stockings hung there with care. Braden's, Zoe's. Even one for the dog. None for me. "You haven't paid the mortgage in 3 months, Zoe," I said calmly. Zoe turned to Braden, horror dawning on her face. "Braden, you said you handled the payments. You said the account was on autopay." Braden looked down at the rug. He couldn't meet her eyes. "I needed the cash," he mumbled. "The interest rates on the loans, the Russos, they were threatening to break my legs, Zoe. I skipped a few payments. I was going to make it up. Once the land deal went through, I was going to pay it all back." He turned to me, holding up the folder. "But Thad, Mr. King, this notice, it says the lender is the King Trust." I smiled. It was a cold winter smile. "Does that name sound familiar, Braden?" I asked. Braden's eyes widened. "King Trust. King Holdings. You," he whispered. "You hold the mortgage." I nodded. "When you bought this house 5 years ago, you bragged about getting a private loan with a flexible rate," I said. "You didn't look at who backed the private lender. You didn't check the parent company. You borrowed $3 million from me, Braden. You have been living in my house, sleeping under my roof, and eating in a kitchen bought with my money for 5 years." I pushed off the mantel and walked toward them. And this morning at 8 o'clock, I sat in my office and I reviewed the delinquent accounts, I said. "I saw your name, I saw the missed payments, and I saw the way you treated the man who lent you the money." I took the folder from his trembling hands. "So, I personally signed the acceleration clause," I said. I called the note due. The entire balance, Braden. $3 million plus interest plus penalties, payable immediately. Braden collapsed. He didn't just kneel, he folded in on himself, his forehead touching the floor. He grabbed the hem of my flannel pants. "I don't have it," he sobbed. "You know I don't have it. I am broke, Thad. Please, don't do this. I will work. I will pay you back every cent. Just give me time." "You had time," I said, looking down at him. "You had 5 years. Zoe grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. "Daddy, please," she cried, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "This is my home. This is where we live. You can't just kick us out. Where will we go? It is Christmas." I looked at her. I looked at the daughter who had stood in her kitchen 3 days ago and told me to my face that my home was an embarrassment. "Your home," I repeated. "Yes," she sobbed. "My home. Our sanctuary." I pulled my arm away from her grasp. I walked over to the window and looked out at the snow covering the manicured lawn. I remembered the conversation we had. I remembered the magazine with the Porsche. I remembered the way she had looked at me when Braden told me to stop existing. "You know, Zoe," I said, turning back to face them. "Just the other day you told me something very interesting. You stood in your marble kitchen, and you told me that a trailer isn't a home." Zoe flinched. She remembered. "You said it was a tin can," I continued, my voice rising. "You said it was a pile of junk. You said it was undignified. You were willing to send the bulldozers to crush the place where your mother and I built a life because it didn't look like a mansion to you." I walked back to them. I stood over them both, the gardener towering over the executives. "Well," I said, "I have news for you. This house, this monstrosity with its columns and its heated floors, this isn't a home either, Zoe." She looked at me, confusion and terror warring in her eyes. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "It is not a home," I said. "It is an asset. It is a piece of collateral on a bad debt. And as the owner of that debt, I am liquidating the asset." I pointed to the door. "You have 24 hours, I said. 24 hours. Braden gasped. "That is impossible. We can't move in a day. We have furniture. We have clothes." "I don't care about your furniture," I said coldly. "I don't care about your clothes. Take what you can carry. Put it in your leased car if the repo man hasn't taken it yet. But by tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., I want this house empty. I want the keys on the counter." "But where will we sleep?" Zoe wailed. I looked at her. "You figure it out," I said. "You wanted me to go to a nursing home. You wanted to put me in a small room with no windows. Now you will understand what it feels like to have the roof ripped off from over your head." I looked at Braden. "You said the trailer wasn't a home," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Now you will know what it feels like to have no home at all." Braden looked up at me. His eyes were dead. He realized finally that there was no mercy coming. He realized that the man in the flannel shirt was not just powerful, he was biblical in his justice. I turned to the police officers. "You can take him now," I said. The officers stepped forward. They hauled Braden up by his armpits. He didn't fight. He hung limp like a rag doll. They dragged him toward the door, past the Christmas tree, past the pile of unopened gifts, past the life he had stolen and squandered. Zoe screamed as they took him out. She fell to her knees in the center of the room, surrounded by the wreckage of her vanity. I stood there for a moment watching her. I felt a pang of sorrow, but I crushed it. She needed this. She needed the fire to burn away the rot. I walked to the door. I put my hat on. 24 hours, Zoe," I said. I opened the door and walked out into the cold, leaving her alone in the big empty house that belonged to the bank. The silence that followed my foreclosure announcement was not empty. It was heavy and vibrating like the air right before a lightning strike. Braden stood in the center of the room, clutching the notice of default in his left hand. His right hand was twitching at his side. He looked at the paper, then at me, then at the walls of the mansion that was no longer his. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him. The job was gone. The bank accounts were frozen. The house was repossessed. And the mob, the Russo brothers, were waiting for a payment that he could no longer make. He was a rat trapped in a corner, and I made the mistake of thinking he had accepted his fate. But rats do not accept fate. They bite. Braden let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob. He crumpled the foreclosure notice and threw it on the floor. "You think you have won," he whispered, his voice trembling with a manic energy. "You think you can just walk in here with your flannel shirt and your secret billions and take everything from me. You think I am just going to walk out the door and let the Russos break my legs?" He began to back away toward the antique mahogany desk in the corner of the room. It was a desk he used for show, a desk where he signed lease agreements for cars he could not afford. I watched him. I saw the shift in his eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, irrational madness. "It is over, Braden," I said, my voice calm. "Do not make it worse. The police are outside. Just walk out." "No," he screamed. He lunged for the top drawer of the desk. Zoe screamed. "Dad, look out." Braden ripped the drawer open. He reached inside and pulled out a gun. It was a snub-nosed revolver, chrome-plated, shiny, and unused. It was the kind of gun a man buys because he thinks it makes him look tough, not because he knows how to use it. But a gun in the hands of a fool is just as deadly as a gun in the hands of a soldier. He leveled it at my chest. His hands were shaking so violently that the barrel wavered in the air like a branch in a storm. "Sit down," he ordered. I did not move. I stood my ground, my boots planted firmly on the hardwood floor. "Put the gun down, Braden," I said. "You have never fired a weapon in your life. The kickback alone will break your wrist." "Shut up," he shrieked. He used his other hand to steady the gun. I said, "Sit down." Zoe scrambled off the sofa and fell to her knees, her hands over her head. "Braden, please stop." "That is my father." Braden ignored her. His eyes were locked on me. They were wide and wild, filled with the terrifying clarity of a man who has run out of options. "Get the deed," he said, pointing the gun at the coffee table. I looked at the folder containing the transfer documents, the ones I had refused to sign. "Pick it up," he yelled. I walked slowly to the table. I picked up the folder. "Now sign it," he said, breathing hard. "Sign the transfer. Backdate it to yesterday. If I have the land, I have collateral. If I have collateral, the Russos will give me an extension. It is the only way I live, Thad. Sign the paper." I looked at the pen lying on the table. Then I looked at him. I held the folder in my hand. I felt the weight of the decision. If I signed, he might let me live. But he would destroy the land. He would destroy Lucille's memory, and he would learn nothing. He would learn that violence works. He would learn that he could bully his way out of consequences. I tossed the folder back onto the table. It landed with a soft slap. "No," I said. Braden blinked. He looked at the gun, then back at me as if he couldn't believe I wasn't cowering. "Did you hear me?" he screamed. "I have a gun. I will kill you. I have nothing left to lose." I took a step toward him. Just one step, but it was enough to make him flinch. "You have everything to lose," I said, my voice deep and resonant, filling the room. I looked straight down the barrel of the revolver. I had stared down union busters with baseball bats in the 70s. I had stared down mafia enforcers on construction sites in the 80s. I knew what death looked like, and it did not look like this soft, panic-stricken boy in a silk robe. "Think about it, Braden," I said, holding his gaze. "Let us play this out. You pull that trigger. The bullet hits me. Maybe I die. Maybe I don't. But the moment that gun goes off, your life ends." I took another step. "If you kill me, you go to prison for life without parole," I said. "You will trade this mansion for a 6x8 cell. You will trade your silk sheets for a concrete cot. And in there, Braden, you are not a director. You are not a boss. You are prey." Braden's lip quivered. The gun dipped slightly. "But if you don't kill me," I continued, taking another step, closing the distance. "If you put the gun down, you still go to prison. But you go for fraud. You do 10 years, maybe 5 with good behavior. You come out. You are still young. You can start over." I stopped 5 feet away from him. "So here is your choice," I said. "You shoot me, you lose everything forever. You don't shoot me, you lose everything for now. Choose," I roared. Braden stared at me. Sweat was pouring down his face, mixing with his tears. He was shaking so hard the gun rattled in his grip. He wanted to shoot. I could see it. He wanted to silence the voice of authority that was making him feel so small, but he was a coward, and cowards calculate the odds even in their madness. He looked at the deed. He looked at me. "Sign it," he whimpered. "Please, just sign it. I don't want to shoot you. I just want the money." "I am not signing, Braden," I said softly. "The bank is closed." Braden let out a scream of frustration. He raised the gun higher, aiming right at my head. His finger tightened on the trigger. He squeezed his eyes shut. "Goodbye, Thad," he whispered. I did not flinch. I did not close my eyes. I watched him. And then I saw it. A tiny red dot appeared on the center of Braden's chest right over the silk lapel of his robe. It danced for a fraction of a second and then settled steady as a rock. Then another red dot appeared on his forehead, and a third on his gun hand. Braden didn't see them. His eyes were closed, bracing for the recoil. "Drop it," I said. Braden opened his eyes. "Why are you not dead?" he asked, confused. "Look at your chest," I said. Braden looked down. He saw the red laser light glowing on his heart. He gasped. He looked at his hand. The red dot was there too. He looked at the window. Through the glass he could see movement in the snow, dark shapes, professional shapes. Crash! The French doors leading to the patio exploded inward. Glass shattered, raining down on the carpet like diamonds. 3 men burst into the room. They were not police officers. They wore black tactical gear with no badges. They moved with a speed and precision that made the police look like amateurs. The man in the lead was huge, a mountain of muscle in a dark suit. It was Earl, my head of security, the man who had parked my truck the night before. "Drop the weapon!" Earl shouted, his voice booming like thunder. "Drop it, or you are dust!" He leveled a military-grade rifle at Braden. Braden screamed and threw the gun away as if it had turned into a snake. It clattered across the floor, spinning under the sofa. Braden threw his hands up. "Don't shoot! Don't shoot! I surrender!" Earl moved in. He didn't walk, he flowed. He grabbed Braden by the back of his neck and slammed him face first onto the rug. "Stay down," Earl roared, pressing his knee into Braden's spine. 2 other guards secured the room, clearing the corners, checking the exits. They moved to stand in front of me, forming a human wall between me and the threat. Earl looked up at me. His face was grim. "Mr. King, are you injured?" "I am fine, Earl," I said. I brushed a shard of glass off my sleeve. "Just a little family dispute." Earl hauled Braden up. He pulled a pair of zip ties from his belt and cinched them around Braden's wrists tight enough to cut circulation. Braden was sobbing now, loud heaving gasps. "Who are these people?" he wailed. "Who are you?" "Thad." I walked over to him. I looked down at the man who had held a gun to my head. "I told you, Braden," I said. "I am the chairman." I pointed to Earl. "And this is my private security detail. They have been watching the house since midnight. They were just waiting for you to cross the line from white-collar criminal to violent offender." I leaned in close. "You just crossed it." Zoe was still on the floor, staring at the shattered glass of the patio doors. She looked at Earl. She looked at the laser sights on the rifles. She looked at me. "You had snipers," she whispered. "You had snipers outside my house." I looked at her. "I protect my assets, Zoe," I said. The front door burst open again. This time it was the police, the real police. They ran in, guns drawn, confused by the scene of private security holding the suspect. Earl flashed a badge. He was retired CPD and he still carried the authority. "Suspect secured," Earl announced. "Attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon. We have it all on video." He pointed to a small camera clipped to his vest. The police officers took Braden from Earl. They replaced the zip ties with steel handcuffs. They read him his rights, but Braden wasn't listening. He was staring at me. He looked at the old man in the flannel shirt. He looked at the gardener he had mocked. And finally he understood. He hadn't been fighting a man. He had been fighting an institution. "Take him away," I said, turning my back. As they dragged him out, Braden didn't scream. He didn't beg. He just hung his head, defeated by the weight of his own hubris. I walked over to the desk where the gun lay on the floor. I looked at it. It was a cheap gun, just like Braden. Flashy on the outside, hollow on the inside. I looked at Earl. "Good timing," I said. Earl cracked a rare smile. "We aim to please Mr. King." I looked around the ruined room. The snow was blowing in through the broken doors. The Christmas tree had fallen over in the scuffle. The party was definitely over. The wind howling through the shattered patio doors was biting and cold, carrying the scent of snow and exhaust fumes from the police cruisers idling in the driveway. It swirled around the living room, lifting the edges of the wrapping paper on the unopened gifts and rustling the needles of the fallen Christmas tree. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the chill that settled in the room as the uniformed officers took custody of my son-in-law. Earl and his team stepped back, their job done, fading into the periphery like silent sentinels, while the chaotic machinery of the law took over. I watched Braden Reynolds, the man who had stood at the head of this table and toasted to my disappearance, now being hauled to his feet by two officers who looked like they had no patience for men in silk robes. The zip ties Earl had used were cut off only to be replaced immediately by the heavy metallic click of steel handcuffs. That sound. That sharp mechanical snap. It is a sound that signals the end of freedom and the beginning of a very long nightmare. Braden was hyperventilating. His chest heaved up and down and his eyes darted around the room looking for an exit, looking for a lawyer, looking for anyone who would listen to him. "I demand to speak to the chief of police." Braden sputtered, spit flying from his lips. "Do you know who I am? I am a director at Apex Realty. I live in this house. You cannot treat me like a common criminal." A detective in a trench coat stepped forward. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had missed Christmas morning with his own family to deal with a white-collar criminal who thought he was above the law. He held a clipboard in his hand. Braden Reynolds, the detective, said, his voice flat and bored. "You are under arrest." For what? Braden screamed, struggling against the grip of the officers. "For defending my home. That man broke in. He has private militia. I was standing my ground." The detective didn't even look up from his clipboard. "You are under arrest for 18 counts of wire fraud," he read. 12 counts of embezzlement from corporate accounts, money laundering, and thanks to the video evidence we just secured, assault with a deadly weapon and attempted murder. Attempted murder! Braden gasped. The fight went out of him. His knees buckled and the officers had to hold him up to keep him from hitting the floor. I didn't mean to shoot him," Braden whispered. "It was just a threat. The gun wasn't even loaded." "I don't think it was loaded." "It was loaded," the detective said. "We checked the chamber. 6 rounds of hollow points. If you had pulled that trigger, Mr. King would be dead and you would be looking at life without parole. As it stands, you are looking at 20 to 30 years. 30 years. The words hung in the air like smoke. I saw the realization crash into Braden. He did the math. He was 35 years old. He would be an old man when he walked free. He would be older than I was now. He looked at me. He looked at the man in the flannel shirt who was still standing tall, still holding his glass of tea, still watching with the impassive gaze of a judge. "Thad," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Thad, please. You can't let them do this. I am family. I am Zoe's husband. Think of Zoe." I looked at Zoe. She was still on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and shattered dreams. She was staring at Braden with wide, terrified eyes. She was waiting for him to tell her it was a mistake. She was waiting for him to protect her. But Braden Reynolds was not a protector. He was a parasite, and when a parasite is threatened, it consumes the host to survive. He saw that I wasn't going to help him. He saw the wall of ice in my eyes. He realized that his charm, his suits, and his lies had finally run out of currency. He panicked. It was a primal, ugly thing to watch. He started looking for a scapegoat. He started looking for someone, anyone to throw under the bus to break his fall. His eyes landed on Zoe. "It wasn't me," he screamed, twisting his body toward the detective. "I didn't want to do it. It was her idea." The room went silent. Zoe blinked, confusion clouding her tear-stained face. "What?" she whispered. "She made me do it!" Braden yelled, his voice rising to a hysterical pitch. He pointed a cuffed hand at his wife. "She is the one who wanted the money. She is the one who wanted the Porsche. She told me to sell the land. She told me the old man was senile. She said he wouldn't notice if we moved the assets." Braden, Zoe gasped. "What are you saying? Don't look at me like that!" Braden shouted, spitting the words at her. "You loved the lifestyle, didn't you, Zoe? You loved the country club. You loved the jewelry. You pushed me. You said I wasn't making enough money. You said your father was sitting on a gold mine and he was too stupid to use it." "No," Zoe cried, scrambling to her feet. "I never said that. I never told you to steal." "You signed the checks," Braden screamed. "The joint account. Your name is on the tax return, Zoe. You are an accomplice. Officer, arrest her too. She knew everything. She is the mastermind. I was just trying to make my wife happy. I was just doing what she told me." I watched him. I watched a man destroy the woman he had vowed to love and cherish, just to try and shave a year off his sentence. It was the most pathetic display of cowardice I had ever seen. Zoe stood there, her hands covering her mouth, her body shaking. She looked at the man she had married, the man she had defended against me, the man she had chosen over her own father. She didn't see the handsome executive anymore. She didn't see the provider. She saw a rat, a cornered, shivering rat who was willing to eat her alive to save himself. The illusion shattered. I could almost hear the sound of it breaking. The glass house she had built in her mind crashed down around her. She looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. She wanted me to step in. She wanted me to tell the police that Braden was lying. But I stood still. I let her hear it. I let her hear every word of his betrayal. Because she needed to know. She needed to feel the sharp edge of the knife she had helped to sharpen. The detective looked at Zoe, then back at Braden with open disgust. "Mr. Reynolds," the detective said, "we have the forensic accounting logs. We have your IP address. We have your signature on the unauthorized transfers. We know who moved the money, and yelling at your wife isn't going to change the evidence. Get him out of here," the detective ordered. The officers dragged Braden toward the door. He kicked and screamed, his heels digging into the expensive carpet, leaving tracks of desperation. "Zoe, tell them it was you. Don't let me go alone. You owe me. I bought you that necklace. I bought you this life, you ungrateful cow." His voice faded as they shoved him through the broken door and into the back of the cruiser. The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The room fell silent again, save for the wind and the sound of Zoe's breathing. It was a ragged, gasping sound. She stood alone in the center of the room. The space where her husband had been was empty. The life she thought she had was empty. She looked down at her wrist. She looked at the diamond tennis bracelet Braden had given her. The bracelet paid for with stolen money. The bracelet that was a shackle, not a gift. She let out a sob that tore from her throat. She ripped the bracelet off her arm, breaking the clasp. She threw it across the room. It hit the wall and vanished into the debris. She looked at me. I stood by the fireplace, my arms crossed. I was not smiling. There was no victory in seeing my child destroyed, even if she had brought it on herself. "Daddy," she whispered. She took a step toward me. She looked like she was going to faint. Her legs gave out and she sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands, weeping with the raw agony of a woman who realizes she has been sleeping next to a monster. I watched her cry. I let her cry. The police were busy cataloging evidence. Earl was supervising the cleanup. I walked over to where she was huddled on the rug. I did not kneel down. I stood over her, my shadow falling across her shaking shoulders. I waited until her sobs quieted to a whimper. "He blamed you," I said, my voice low and hard. "Even at the end, when he had nothing left to lose, he didn't try to save you. He tried to sell you." Zoe looked up at me. Her makeup smeared her face swollen. I didn't know, she choked out. "I swear, Daddy, I didn't know he was stealing. I thought he was successful." "You didn't know because you didn't want to know," I said. "You liked the fantasy too much to ask about the price tag." I looked at the door where Braden had exited. "That man," I said, pointing with my cane. "That is the man you defended when he called me a burden. That is the man you agreed with when he said I should stop existing." Zoe flinched. "He showed you who he was, Zoe," I said. "And he just showed you again." I leaned down close to her. "Do not forget this moment," I whispered. "Do not ever forget what it feels like to be sold for a plea deal, because that feeling, that is the only truth he ever gave you." Zoe reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold. "Help me," she begged. "Please, Daddy, I have nothing. He took everything." I looked at her hand. I thought about pulling her up. I thought about wrapping her in my arms and telling her I would fix it. I could write a check. I could buy her a new house. I could make the pain go away. But I looked at the broken glass. I looked at the eviction notice on the table. If I picked her up now, she would never learn to stand. She would just look for the next man to carry her. I pulled my hand away. "I cannot help you, Zoe," I said, straightening up. "Not the way you want." I turned and walked toward the door, where the cold wind was blowing in. "You are on your own," I said. And for the first time in her life, she truly was. The police cars had faded into the distance, leaving only the red and blue after images burning in the cold night air. The front door was broken, hanging off its hinges and letting the winter wind swirl into the foyer, carrying snowflakes that melted on the expensive marble floor. I stood in the center of the wreckage of my daughter's life. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Zoe was on the floor. She had crawled toward me, her designer dress torn at the knee, her mascara running in black rivers down her face. She wrapped her arms around my leg, pressing her cheek against the rough denim of my work pants. It was a gesture of total submission of a child seeking shelter from a storm she had helped create. "Daddy," she sobbed, her body shaking with violent tremors. "Please, you have to help me. I have nothing. He took it all. The accounts are frozen. The cards are declined. I do not even have cash for a cab." I looked down at her. I felt the warmth of her tears soaking through my pant leg. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to bend down to pick her up, to wrap her in my arms and tell her that I would fix it. That is what a father does. He fixes things. He kills the spiders, he mends the broken toys, he writes the checks. For 32 years, I had been her shield. I had protected her from the rain, from the cold, and from the consequences of her own choices. And look where it had gotten us. My protection had not made her strong. It had made her soft. It had made her entitled. It had turned her into a woman who could watch her husband humiliate her father and do nothing but laugh because she was afraid of losing her heated seats. I reached down. I took her hands. They were cold and trembling. Zoe looked up, hope flooding her eyes. She thought I was going to pull her up. She thought I was going to take her to my penthouse and order her a warm meal. I peeled her fingers off my leg one by one. I did not pull her up. I stepped back, leaving her kneeling on the cold floor alone. "Daddy?" she whispered, confusion clouding her face. "What are you doing?" "I am doing what I should have done 10 years ago," I said, my voice low and steady. "I am letting you fall." Zoe gasped. No, you can't. I am your daughter. You are rich now. You are a billionaire. You can buy me a house. You can buy me 10 houses. It would be nothing to you. It would be nothing to my bank account," I agreed. "But it would be everything to your soul." I walked over to the side table where Braden had left a notepad. I took a pen from my pocket. Not a gold pen. A cheap plastic Bic pen, the kind that works even when it is dirty. I scribbled something on the paper. Zoe watched me, pulling herself up to a sitting position. "I did not know, Daddy," she pleaded again, returning to her only defense. "I did not know he was a criminal. I am a victim here. Stop saying that," I snapped. The harshness of my voice made her flinch. I turned to face her, holding the pen like a weapon. "You did not know about the embezzlement, fine, I will give you that. But you knew about the cruelty." I walked closer to her. "Last night, Zoe. Right here in this room. Your husband stood where I am standing now. He held a glass of scotch and he told a room full of people that the best gift I could give you was to stop existing. He wished for my death. He called me a burden. He called me a stain." Zoe looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I was scared," she mumbled. "I watched you, Zoe," I continued. "I watched your face. I waited for you to speak. I waited for you to say, 'That is my father you are talking about.' I waited for you to spill your drink on him. I waited for you to walk out." I paused, letting the memory hang in the air between us. "But you didn't do any of those things. You laughed." Zoe began to cry again, harder this time. It was a nervous laugh, she sobbed. "I didn't mean it. It sounded real to me," I said. "It sounded like you were relieved that he was saying it so you didn't have to. You laughed because you wanted to fit in with his friends more than you wanted to defend me. You chose the pearls over the person." I looked around the room at the opulent furniture, the velvet drapes, the crystal chandelier. "You fell in love with this house," I said. "You fell in love with the status, and you were willing to pay for it with my dignity. You sat in my kitchen 3 days ago and told me my home was a tin can. You looked at my hands, the hands that built this city, and you called them embarrassing." "I am sorry," she wailed. "I am so sorry, Daddy. I was wrong. I see that now." "You see it now because the lights are out," I said. "You see it now because the check bounced. That is not repentance, Zoe. That is regret, and regret is cheap." I tore the piece of paper off the notepad. I walked back to her and held it out. Zoe reached for it, her hand shaking. She took it. She looked at what I had written. It was an address. 402 East 42nd Street. Apartment 4B. She frowned. She looked up at me. "Where is this?" she asked. 42nd Street. That is the South Side. That is the slums." I nodded. "It is the neighborhood where I grew up," I said. "It is the neighborhood where I met your mother. It is the neighborhood where I started my company with a shovel and a bucket of mix." "Why are you giving me this?" she asked, horror dawning in her eyes. "Because I own that building," I said. "It is not a penthouse. It is a walk-up. The radiator clanks. The windows rattle when the train goes by. And the elevator has been broken since 1985. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key. It was a single brass key on a plain wire ring. No fob, no remote entry. I dropped the key into her palm. "Apartment 4B is empty," I said. "It has a bed. It has a stove. It has a roof. That is more than you have right now. You want me to live there, she whispered. In the ghetto. I want you to survive there, I corrected her. I stepped back, looking her in the eye. Here is the deal, Zoe. The bank of Dad is closed. I am not giving you a cent. I am not buying you a car. I am not paying for your lawyer. But how will I eat, she cried. How will I live? You will work, I said. Work, she repeated the word, feeling foreign on her tongue. Yes, work, I said. There is a diner on the corner. Talk to Sal. Tell him Thaddeus sent you. He needs a dishwasher. Or try the laundromat down the block. They always need help folding sheets. Dishwasher? She gasped. Dad, look at me. I cannot wash dishes. I have a master's degree in art history. Then hang the diploma over the sink, I said coldly. It won't scrub the plates for you. I leaned down, getting eye level with her. You have spent your whole life being carried, Zoe. Braden carried you with stolen money. I carried you with guilt money. And because we carried you, your legs are weak. You don't know how to stand. I pointed to the door. You are going to that apartment, and you are going to stay there for 6 months. 6 months, she shrieked. I won't last a week. I will be mugged. I will freeze. You might, I said. But if you are my daughter, if you have even a drop of my blood in your veins, you will figure it out. I stood up straight. Here are the rules, I said. You pay your own electric bill, you buy your own groceries, you take the bus, and Zoe, if you sell yourself, if you find another rich man to leech off of, if you trade your dignity for another tennis bracelet, then do not come back. I turned away from her. But Dad, she pleaded, grabbing my coat. I can't do it. I am scared. I stopped. I didn't look back. You should be scared, I said. Reality is scary, but it is the only place where you can find out who you really are. I walked to the shattered door. The wind hit me biting and raw. I will be watching Zoe, I said. I have eyes in that neighborhood. If you work hard, if you keep your head down, if you learn what $1 actually costs, then come find me in 6 months. We will have coffee. And if I don't, she asked, her voice barely a whisper, then you can keep the key, I said, because that is all you will ever get from me. I stepped out into the night. I walked down the long driveway, past the police tape, past the neighbors who were peering out of their windows. I climbed into my old Ford truck. I started the engine. I looked back at the mansion one last time. I saw Zoe standing in the doorway, clutching the brass key, looking out at the snow. She looked small. She looked terrified. But she was standing. I put the truck in gear and drove away. My heart was breaking, but I knew I had just given her the only gift that mattered. I had given her a chance to exist. Not as a wife, not as a daughter, but as a human being. The drive back to the lake was the longest drive of my life. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the confrontation at the mansion and the heartbreak at the police station began to fade, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that settled into my marrow. My old Ford truck rattled over the potholes of the county road, the headlights cutting 2 yellow cones through the swirling snow. I did not turn on the radio. I did not want to hear Christmas carols. I did not want to hear joy. I wanted the hum of the engine and the sound of my own tires on the asphalt. When I finally turned onto the gravel driveway of my property, the sun was beginning to hint at the horizon, a bruised purple line separating the black water of Lake Michigan from the gray sky. I pulled the truck up next to the Airstream. My headlights swept over the silver aluminum skin of the trailer. To Braden, it had been an eyesore. To Zoe, it had been a tin can. But to me, as I sat there with the engine idling, it looked like the most beautiful thing on earth. It was solid. It was paid for. And it was mine. I turned off the truck. The silence that rushed in was absolute. No screaming, no sirens, no accusations. Just the wind in the bare trees and the rhythmic lapping of the lake water against the shore. I stepped out into the cold. The air was sharp and clean. It smelled of pine needles and coming snow, not of expensive cologne and deception. I walked over to the fire pit Lucille and I had built 20 years ago. It was just a ring of river stones blackened by 1,000 fires, but it was the heart of our home. I didn't go inside the trailer. I wasn't ready to be enclosed. I needed the sky. I needed to breathe. I gathered some dry wood from the stack under the tarp. I arranged the kindling. I struck a match. The flame flared up, fighting the wind for a second before catching the dry bark. I watched the fire grow. I watched it turn from a fragile flicker into a steady roar. I pulled my old folding canvas chair close to the warmth and sat down. I sat there for a long time watching the smoke spiral up into the dawn. I was a billionaire, sitting in a $20 chair in the snow, wearing a flannel shirt stained with dried blood. And I felt richer in that moment than I ever had sitting in the boardroom of King Tower. This was freedom. Freedom from the lie I had been living to test my family. Freedom from the burden of saving people who did not want to be saved. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It vibrated against my leg, a reminder that the world was still turning. I pulled it out. It was Marcus. I answered. "Report," I said. My voice was raspy from the smoke and the shouting. "It is done, Thad," Marcus said. His voice was crisp, professional, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. "Give me the numbers," I said. "We executed the liquidation protocols at 4 a.m., Marcus said. The audit team moved fast. We seized Braden's corporate accounts first. Then we exercised the lien on his personal assets. The leased Bentley was repossessed an hour ago. The dealer was not happy, but he took it back." "And the contents of the house?" I asked. "The repo team is there now," Marcus said. "They are cataloging everything. The furniture, the artwork, the electronics. It is all being tagged and loaded onto trucks. By noon, that mansion will be nothing but bare walls and echo." "Good," I said, staring into the fire. "And the debt, the Russos." Marcus paused. "We settled it," he said. "You paid them?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "We bought the debt," Marcus corrected me. Shadow Corp purchased the promissory note from the Russo brothers for cents on the dollar. They were happy to get their principal back without having to break any legs. They walked away, Thad. "They know who you are now. They won't be coming back. So I own his gambling debt too," I said. "You own everything," Marcus confirmed. "You own his past, his present, and his future. And the proceeds," I asked. "The money from the liquidation, the money from the sale of his fancy watches and his designer suits. What is the total?" After paying off the bank liens and the legal fees, Marcus said we cleared about $200,000. "It is not much compared to what he stole, but it is something." "Transfer it," I said. "Where do you want it sent, Thad? Back to the general fund?" "No," I said. "Send it to the Lucille King Foundation." There was a silence on the line. Marcus knew what that foundation did. I had started it the day after Lucille's funeral. "Allocated to which department?" Marcus asked softly. "The housing initiative," I said. "Use Braden's money to build tiny homes for the homeless. Use the money he stole to put roofs over the heads of people he despised." I could hear Marcus smiling through the phone. "That is poetic justice, Thad." "It is not poetry," I said. "It is balance." He wanted to throw me on the street. Now his vanity will keep someone else off of it. "Anything else, Mr. Chairman?" "No, Marcus." "Go home. Spend Christmas with your family." "You too, Thad." I hung up. I put the phone on the ground next to my boot. I looked out at the lake. The sun had broken the horizon now, painting the water in stripes of gold. The light hit the snow, turning the world into diamonds. I reached into the back pocket of my jeans. I pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It had been sitting there since the party, since the moment Braden had handed it to me with that smug look on his face. It was the brochure. Golden Meadows Senior Living. I smoothed it out on my knee. I looked at the glossy photo of the smiling old people who were really sedated and ignored. I looked at the slogan, "Dignity in your twilight years." I remembered the smell of that place, the urine and the pine cleaner. I remembered Braden's voice whispering in my ear, "Next Monday the bulldozers are coming." I remembered him standing in front of his friends telling me the best gift I could give was to stop existing. I looked at the fire. The flames were hungry, dancing orange and blue. "You were wrong, Braden," I whispered to the empty air. "I did not stop existing. I just stopped being the victim." I tore the brochure in half. The sound of the thick paper ripping was sharp and satisfying. I tore it again and again, until it was just a pile of confetti in my calloused hand. I threw the pieces into the fire. I watched them catch. I watched the glossy finish bubble and melt. I watched the picture of the nursing home turn black and curl into ash. I watched the lies burn. The smoke rose up, carrying the last of Braden's threats away into the winter sky. I leaned back in my chair. I closed my eyes. I felt the heat of the fire on my face and the cold of the wind on my neck. I was alone. My daughter was in a slum. My son-in-law was in a cell. My wife was in the ground. But I was here. I reached down and picked up a thermos of coffee I had set by the fire to keep warm. I poured a cup. I held it up to the sky. "Merry Christmas, Lucille," I said. I drank the coffee. It was strong and bitter and hot. It tasted like freedom. Summer came to the lake not with a shout, but with a whisper. The ice that had choked the shoreline melted away into deep blue water, and the bare trees that had witnessed my son-in-law's downfall exploded into green canopies of maple and oak. 6 months had passed since the night the police took Braden away. 6 months of silence. 6 months of peace. I sat in my folding chair by the fire pit, watching a hawk circle the thermals high above the water. I was 71 now, but I felt younger than I had at 70. The weight of the secret was gone. The weight of the deception was gone. I was just Thaddeus King, a man with a paid-off trailer, a fishing pole, and a bank account that could buy a small country but who preferred the company of squirrels to shareholders. I checked my watch. It was 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. I was not expecting anyone. Marcus handled the business affairs from the tower and only called if something was burning down, which it never was because Marcus was efficient. Earl stopped by on Saturdays. So when I heard the sound of a heavy diesel engine braking on the highway at the top of the hill, I looked up. It was the county bus, the number 42. It stopped at the desolate turnoff that led down to my property. The hydraulic doors hissed open. A single figure stepped out. The bus pulled away, leaving a cloud of black exhaust that hung in the humid air. I watched the figure begin the long walk down the gravel driveway. It was a mile walk. In the old days, Zoe would never have walked a mile. She would have called an Uber. She would have called me to come pick her up. She would have complained about her heels sinking into the dirt. But this figure did not call. She kept walking. As she got closer, I squinted against the sun. I saw a woman wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt. She carried a reusable grocery bag in one hand. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, not styled in the elaborate waves she used to wear. She looked thinner, much thinner. The softness that came from 3-course lunches and spa days was gone, pared away by the friction of survival. It was Zoe. She reached the clearing where the Airstream sat. She stopped about 10 feet away from me. She was breathing hard from the walk. Her forehead was slick with sweat. I stayed in my chair. I did not run to her. I did not smile. I waited. She looked at me. Her skin was darker tanned not by a spray bottle but by walking to bus stops in the sun. There were dark circles under her eyes. She looked tired, bone-tired. The kind of tired you feel when you have been on your feet for 10 hours straight. "Hi, Dad," she said. Her voice was different. It was quieter. The whine was gone. The entitlement was gone. "Hello, Zoe," I said. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She looked at the Airstream. She looked at the lake. She looked at the truck. "I took the bus," she said, pointing a thumb back toward the highway. "It stops at the junction." I said. "It is a long walk." She shrugged. "It is not so bad. I am used to walking now. I sold the Rover. Well, the bank took the Rover, but I walk everywhere. It saves money." She stepped a little closer. She held out the grocery bag. "I brought you something," she said. I looked at the bag. "What is it?" I asked. She reached inside and pulled out a white cardboard box. It was tied with a piece of butcher's twine, not a silk ribbon. "I made it," she said. "It is red velvet, your favorite. I know it is 6 months late, but happy birthday, Dad." I looked at the box. Then I looked at her hands. That was what stopped me. That was what broke the dam of my resolve. Zoe's hands used to be soft. They used to be manicured with French tips and lotions. They were hands that had never touched dishwater. The hands holding the cake box were red. The knuckles were swollen. The skin was rough and peeling. There was a healing burn mark on her forearm, the distinct crescent shape of a hot sheet pan or a fryer basket. Her fingernails were cut short and clean with no polish. These were working hands. These were hands that had scrubbed floors, hands that had washed thousands of plates, hands that had earned every callus. They looked like my mother's hands. They looked like my hands. I stood up. I walked over to her. I took the box from her. It felt heavy, solid. "You baked this?" I asked. She nodded. "I used the oven in the apartment. It runs a little hot so the edges might be crispy, but the middle is good." I bought the flour and the cocoa powder from the tip jar. She looked down at her shoes. They were sneakers, cheap ones, worn at the heel. I didn't come for money, Dad, she said quickly, as if she was afraid I would send her away. I promise. I don't need a check. I paid my rent for next month. I wanted to see you. I looked at her face. I searched for the lie. I searched for the angle. I searched for the Zoe who wanted a Porsche. I couldn't find her. She was gone, burned away by the fire of reality. Sit down, Zoe, I said. I pointed to the other canvas chair, the one opposite mine. She sat. She looked grateful just to be off her feet. She leaned back and closed her eyes for a second, listening to the wind in the trees. I went into the trailer. I put the cake on the counter. I poured 2 mugs of black coffee from the pot. I carried them outside. I handed one to her. She took it with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her aching palms. Thank you, she whispered. I sat down across from her. I took a sip of my coffee. So I said, Tell me. Tell you what she asked. Tell me about the last 6 months, I said. Tell me about the apartment. Tell me about the job. Zoe took a deep breath. She blew the steam off her coffee. It was hell, she said bluntly. She looked me in the eye. The first week I thought I was going to die. The apartment had roaches. The heat didn't work. I cried every night. I hated you, Dad. I really hated you. I lay on that mattress and I cursed your name. I waited for you to call. I waited for you to save me. And when I didn't call, I asked. Then I got hungry, she said simply. I ran out of the cash I had in my purse. I realized nobody was coming. So I walked to Sal's diner, the one you told me about. Sal, I said, smiling slightly. He is a tough old bird. He laughed at me, she said. I walked in there in my designer jeans and asked for a job. He told me I wouldn't last an hour. He put me on the dish pit. She looked at her hands, rubbing the burn mark on her arm. The water was scalding. The grease was everywhere. My back hurt so bad I couldn't stand up straight. I broke 3 plates the first day. Sal docked it from my pay. I went home with $40 and blisters on every finger. She took a sip of coffee. But I went back the next day. Why, I asked. Because I had to buy eggs, she said. And because Sal told me I was useless. Just like Braden used to tell me I was useless without him. And I wanted to prove him wrong. She looked out at the lake. Her eyes were clear and steady. I worked double shifts. I learned how to close the grill. I learned how to mop a floor so it doesn't leave streaks. I made friends with the waitress, Maria. She showed me how to budget for groceries. She showed me which bus to take to save time. She paused. I met a guy, she said. I stiffened. A guy. A customer. She continued. He came in with a suit, expensive watch. He started flirting with me. He told me I was too pretty to be washing dishes. He offered to take me to dinner. He offered to take care of me. I watched her closely. This was the test. This was the trap. What did you do? I asked. Zoe smiled. It was a sad, wise smile. I looked at his watch, she said. It was a Rolex, just like Braden's. I looked at his smile. It was the same shark smile, and I realized I would rather scrub grease off a grill for $10 an hour than ever be owned by a man like that again. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. So I told him to get lost, she said. I told him I buy my own dinner now. She drank her coffee. And I do, Dad. I buy my own dinner. It is usually just pasta or beans, but I buy it. I pay my electric bill. I wash my own clothes. And every night when I lock that door on 42nd Street, I am scared. But I am not ashamed. She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes again, but these were not tears of manipulation. These were tears of pride. I exist. Dad, she whispered. I exist without the money. I exist without the mansion. I am Zoe. Just Zoe. And I think I like her better this way. I looked at my daughter. The sun was starting to dip lower, casting long shadows across the grass. She sat there in her cheap clothes with her rough hands and her tired face. She looked like royalty. I stood up. I walked over to the table where she had put the cake. I untied the twine. I opened the box. The cake was lopsided. The frosting was smeared. It looked like a mess. I cut 2 big slices. I put them on paper plates. I walked back and handed her a slice. She watched me take a bite. The red velvet was dense. It was a little dry. It is delicious, I said. Zoe smiled, a real genuine smile that reached her eyes. Really, she asked. Really, I said. I sat back down. You kept the key, I said. She nodded, touching her pocket. I did. It is my home. I looked at the lake. I looked at the empire I had built and the peace I had found. Sal called me, I said. Zoe froze. He did. About 3 months ago, I said. He told me he hired a girl who looked like she had never held a sponge in her life. He told me he tried to break her. He told me he gave her the worst shifts. And Zoe asked nervously, and he told me she was the hardest worker he has had in 20 years, I said. He told me she doesn't complain. He told me she has grit. I looked at her. He promoted you to shift manager last week, didn't he? I asked. Zoe blushed. Yes, it is just $1 raise, but I get to hold the keys to the shop. You earned those keys, I said. I finished my cake. I wiped the crumbs from my mouth. I am proud of you, Zoe, I said. She stared at me, her lip trembled. You are, she whispered. After everything I did, because of everything you did, I corrected her. You climbed out of the hole. You saved yourself. That is all I ever wanted. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my wallet. Zoe stiffened. Dad, I told you I don't want money. I ignored her. I pulled out a card. It wasn't a credit card. It wasn't a check. It was a business card. White, simple. King Holdings in black letters. I handed it to her. What is this? She asked, looking at it. Turn it over, I said. She turned it over. On the back in my handwriting was a date and a time. Monday, 9 a.m. Suite 600. I am not giving you money, Zoe, I said, and I am not giving you a job. She looked confused. Then what is this? It is an interview, I said. An interview, she asked. For the entry-level position in the property management division, I said. You will start at the bottom. You will answer phones. You will file paperwork. You will deal with tenant complaints from buildings just like the one you live in. The pay is starting wage. You will still take the bus. You will still live on 42nd Street. I leaned forward. But if you work hard, if you show up on time, if you treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO, then maybe in a few years you will run that division. Zoe looked at the card. She ran her thumb over the embossed letters. You would hire me, she asked, after I betrayed you. I hire people who know the value of $1, I said. And I hire people who know what it feels like to have nothing. Because those are the only people who know how to build something that lasts. I stood up. Eat your cake, I said. Then I will drive you to the bus stop. I don't want you walking in the dark. Zoe looked at the card one last time. She slipped it into her pocket right next to the key to her apartment. She took a bite of the cake. She smiled. It is a little dry, isn't it? She admitted. It is perfect, I said. And as we sat there watching the sun go down over the water, I knew that for the first time in years I wasn't sitting with a stranger. I was sitting with my daughter. And she was finally home. The seasons changed again. The green leaves of summer turned to the burnt orange of autumn, and the air around the lake grew crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and coming frost. It has been a year since the Christmas that tore my family apart and stitched it back together in a way I never expected. Zoe showed up for that interview on Monday morning at 8:45. She was wearing a suit she bought at a thrift store, and she looked terrified, but she walked into the mailroom and she went to work. She didn't ask for a corner office. She didn't mention her last name. She sorted packages, she filed invoices, and she answered phones for 8 hours a day. But the real education didn't happen in the glass tower of King Holdings. It happened right here at this rusted aluminum folding table outside my Airstream trailer. Every Friday night, Zoe takes the bus out to the lake. She brings a stack of files from the office, financial reports, zoning applications, and blueprints. We sit by the fire pit under the stars, and I teach her how to read the language of concrete and steel. I teach her that a profit margin means nothing if the foundation is cracked. I teach her that a handshake is worth more than a 10-page contract if you are looking the man in the eye. I teach her that the people who clean the floors know more about the building than the people who sit in the boardroom. She listens. She takes notes in a cheap spiral notebook. And slowly I watch the vanity fade away, completely replaced by a sharp, quiet intelligence that reminds me of her mother. Last week I put a document in front of her. It was a trust fund. The Thaddeus King Legacy Trust. It contains the deed to the land, the shares of the company, and enough money to ensure she never has to worry about heating bills again. Zoe looked at it. She pulled her hand back. "I don't want it, Dad," she said. "I am doing fine on my own. I got a raise. I can buy my own winter coat this year." "I know you can," I said, sliding the paper closer to her. "That is why I am giving this to you." I explained the terms. It is not a blank check. It is a conditional living trust. She cannot touch the principal for 10 years. She cannot use the funds for luxury cars or vacations. The money is designated for reinvestment in the company and for the charitable housing foundation we started with Braden's liquidated assets. "If you ever revert to the person you were," I said, "if you ever treat a waiter with disrespect or judge a man by his shoes, the trust dissolves. The money goes to charity and you go back to zero. Do you accept these terms?" Zoe picked up the pen. She didn't hesitate. She didn't call a lawyer. She signed her name. "I accept," she said. She signed it not as a princess securing her inheritance, but as a partner securing a legacy. She understands now that wealth is a tool, not a toy. As for Braden, he is currently serving year 1 of a 20-year sentence at a federal correctional facility in downstate Illinois. I hear he works in the laundry. I hear he spends his days folding sheets and sorting uniforms. It is hard work, monotonous work, the kind of work he used to sneer at. I hope it teaches him something. I hope that in the silence of his cell he finally understands that the man who folds the sheets is just as important as the man who sleeps in them. But I do not visit him. I do not think about him much at all. He is a ghost, a cautionary tale that we have left behind. My focus is here on the water. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in violent shades of violet and red. I am sitting in my canvas chair, my fishing pole resting on my knee. Next to me, sitting on an overturned bucket, is my daughter. She is holding her own pole, watching the bobber dance in the ripples. She is wearing a flannel shirt she borrowed from my closet. It is too big for her, but she wears it like armor. We don't talk much. We don't need to. The silence between us is comfortable. It is the silence of two people who have seen the worst of each other and chosen to forgive. "I got a bite," Zoe whispers, her eyes locked on the water. "Wait for it," I say softly. "Don't yank. Let him take the bait. Patience." She waits. She breathes. And when the line goes tight, she reels it in with steady, strong hands. She pulls up a small perch. It is not a trophy fish. It is not a prize winner. But she smiles, and it is the brightest thing on the horizon. "Nice catch," I say. "Thanks, Dad," she says, unhooking it and tossing it back. She wipes her hands on her jeans. She looks at me. She looks at the trailer, the fire pit, the simple life I fought so hard to protect. "You were right," she says. "About what?" "About the trailer," she says. "It is not a tin can. It is a castle." I smile. I look at the airstream gleaming in the twilight. "It is just a home, Zoe," I say, "and that is enough." We sit there as the stars come out one by one. I am 71 years old. I have lost a wife. I have nearly lost a daughter. I have fought wars in boardrooms and battles in my own living room. But as I sit here listening to the water and the breathing of the woman who has finally become the daughter I raised, I know that I have won the only victory that matters. I am not just existing. I am living. And for the first time in a long time, the future looks clear. We often judge a book by its cover, but in my life I have learned that the most expensive suits often hide the cheapest souls. My son-in-law mistook modesty for poverty and silence for weakness. He thought dignity was something you could buy with a country club membership. He was wrong. True wealth isn't about the skyscrapers you own, it is about the principles you refuse to sell. When you build your life on the foundation of greed, do not be surprised when the ground beneath you belongs to the very person you tried to bury. If this story touched you, or if you have ever had to teach someone a hard lesson about respect, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever dealt with a family member who valued money over love? Let me know your story in the comments below. Stay humble, stay strong, and I will see you in the next video. Manaji Chandai.